Morning, everybody. Well, it's afternoon now. I'm not exactly sure what time it is. Good worship, Danny. Thanks for that. And we're going to be jumping into a message on the topic of fear in just a minute. But we're going to pause and pray. I'm actually going to give everybody a moment to position themselves before the Lord and to open your heart and say, God, prepare me to receive what you want me to receive out of this message. Take me out of my own judgment. Take me out of my own thinking that I know what's right for me or what I need from something, and just get me into that place where I'm receiving from you in absolute faith and trust that you know what is best. And as I give you a moment to pray that for yourselves, I'm going to pray for myself as well. Today we're going to be talking about fear. What's so scary about fear? You ever think about that? It's kind of like asking the question, what is so painful about pain? You try to put your finger on it, and I think that its power lies in the unknowable nature of it. Like, if you think about pain, the weird thing about pain is if you're in pain, it dominates, you know. If you smashed your thumb with a hammer right now, you wouldn't be thinking about anything else but how much your thumb hurts. It would clear your mind of all other things. It'd be like, my thumb freaking hurts right now. And only as the pain faded would you be able to get your focus back. And you would absolutely know what it is about pain that sucks. What makes it so painful? You'd be like, it's this right here, right in the tip of my thumb. That's what it is. But if I asked you right now to think to the last time you smashed your thumb with a hammer or something like it in a car door or something, it hurt your finger. Yeah, you can remember how your thumb was throbbing, how it was hot, the pressure. But if you push all the other feelings away, you can remember throbbing, you can remember swelling, you can remember the feeling of heat or a tingle or all those other sensations that were around the pain. You can push those aside and say, okay, not those, but to remember the actual pain itself. You can't. It's a weird thing about pain. You can say, I remember describing it to myself. I had an ear infection once. Never really had them before. Came back from Africa and had one. It was horrible. It was from being in the tropics, I guess. And it was like someone, because you're on a plane for like 24 hours. It was terrible by the time I got home. It was like, I remember thinking, it was like somebody driving an ice pick into my head through my ear, just like hammering it in. And I can think back to that, and I can remember saying that. I can remember thinking that. I can remember like almost being in a panic trying to figure out how to make it stop because it was so excruciating. Like, knock me out, this sucks. But if I really push all that aside and say, but the pain, what was that? You can't really put your finger on it. You can't really remember it. And that's the thing. Most of us are not really prepared for pain in our life because we don't think about it and we don't care about it when we're not in pain. You know? Have you ever had a messed up tooth or a kink in your neck or some other injury, broke a bone, jacked up some part of your body, and you're just like, ah! And when you're in pain like that, man, you're like, I should have a better system for handling pain in my life. I should have figured this out a long time ago. I should be able to lean into God, but I'm doing some childish way of trying to hide from it instead. And you're like, I would fix it, except I'm in so much freaking pain right now, I can't really pray, I can't really hear, I can't really work this out right now. But I really should have a better way of handling it. But then the next day your neck pops into the right place or whatever, you get better and you go, thank God it's over. Thank God the pain is gone, right? And then what do? You go, that's over, and you throw it back behind your shoulder. And then when people bring up pain, you're like, yeah. Like you're courageous or hardcore when pain's around, like, oh yeah, pain, not a big deal. Because it's not a big deal now. And it's like you're not really remembering how big of a deal it is when it's happening. Like our memory isn't holding it right. And that's kind of the power of pain. I think fear has that same power. It has the power of the unknown because we don't really remember what it's like to be afraid. When we're afraid and it's happening, we go, wow, this is so much more intense than I usually remember it being. If you got a call right now, the phone rang, and it's your wife screaming about one of your kids. And they were just screaming, somebody got hit by a car. We're on our way to the hospital. I don't know if they're alive or not. And that hit you. It would be as intense and not more intense than if your hand just got smashed by 1,000 pounds and just pasted, you know? It would be like, God! It would be like overwhelming your whole system, right? Fear has that power. And when we're in the midst of it, we go, man, fear enslaves me, it dominates me, it has so much power over me. I should really, as a Christian, I should know how to handle this better. But at the same time, you're like, I am so freaked out about what's going on. If I have any mental clarity, I'm going to be putting it towards fixing the problem. How can I get to the hospital as fast as possible? What do I do? I'm praying my heart out. Let my kid be okay. That's where you're at. Even if it's something, less intense, like, oh man, I might get kicked out of this place. I don't know where I'm going to get the rent money. And you're sitting there like you don't have the mental clarity. Fear kills faith. So you are not praying and hearing effectively. It's not, when you're afraid is not the best time to work on your fear. Like that's a hard time to really work on it, is when you're afraid. But the moment you get out of it, the moment like God drops that money, you're like, thank God I can pay the rent. Or thank God my kid didn't actually get hurt. It's just a couple of bruises. You go, thank God. And the fear disappears. What happens? You throw it over your shoulder. You go, I don't really need to know how to handle my fear. It's not a thing. And you just move on. And that's how it hits when someone goes, I'm going to teach a sermon on fear. You're either like, I really need this. I need this so bad. But you're probably not going to get blessed that much because you're too overwhelmed by your fear. One of my prayers for this service was if anybody tuning in was struggling with fear, that God would surround them in worship and take them out of the fear. Get them to a place of peace. I think the ultimate blessing, which God visited, I'm especially favored this week, is to taste the fear, and then God takes you out of the fear to teach you about it. It's still fresh. You're still like, man, I need to get this covered, but you're not locked in it. You're not in the mouth of fear getting chewed out. And so I hope that's where everybody's at, as much as they can possibly be for this message, because fear is such a destructive force. Last week, Danny was talking about King David, a man who fulfilled his destiny. Why? Because when the devil came knocking with fear, David didn't respond in cowardice. He didn't give into the fear. He didn't let it bestir him to work in his own energy. I'm going to go make myself king with the tip of my own sword. And he didn't let it make him turn into a coward and run away. He stayed close to God. He walked the path of destiny, and he didn't let fear come in and trouble his heart. It's really an incredible achievement. I don't think we would know who David was if it wasn't for his courage, for how he was able to navigate that. So it's a very, very important thing. And I felt like God was saying, like, specifically in this age, fear is more powerful than maybe it's ever been. Certainly more powerful than it's been in a long while. And that's kind of weird when you think about it. Like, if you go back, 30 years, they had the Cold War. Like, they were really, like, there was a real possibility of Russia nuking the world at any moment. You go back a little bit earlier, it gets worse. You could have been drafted into Vietnam and killed. You go back further, you're in the pioneer days, and you could have been on a wagon train to Oregon and get scalped or die of cholera or drowned in a river crossing or something. Like, other generations had more logistical reasons to be afraid, right? But they weren't as afraid as this generation. Why? Why are we drowning in anxiety? Why are people having panic attacks? Why are people popping Xanax like jujubes? Why is that going down? And I felt like God was pointing at the idea of isolation. And that isolation is like pouring kerosene on a campfire. If you're afraid and then you're isolated in your fear, that's when you start coming unglued. That's when you can't hold it together. Fear is at its most powerful when it can whisper in your ear, you're alone. You're alone in this. It's all on you. And I think the ultimate answer to fear is that you're not alone because God is with you. I think that's the ultimate place that God wants to get us to. But until we can get there, even in the sense of socially, before the gospel, before Jesus showed up, God gave us community. He gave us family to help us handle fear, to keep us from being truly isolated. And why we are so fearful and in many ways so stupid, because fear makes you stupid. It makes you desperate. You will buy into any snake oil cure if you're desperately afraid of what's happening. Give me any sort of magic juju, I'll jump on it if it gives me any chance of escaping what's terrifying me right now. And I think our generation is so stupid and so fearful because it's so alone. And I'm not saying like Gen Z, Gen X, boomers, what. It's all of the people that are alive right now are more fearful than they would have been 30 years ago. And the reason why is because all of us have had our civilization implode. All of us have had our families divided by divorce and by people that refuse to commit in marriage, and by men that refuse to be men and women that refuse to be women, dads that refuse to be true fathers, mothers that refuse to be true mothers. And we've ripped apart the fabric of community. And we said, we don't want a community, we want a party where you're friends with who you want to be friends with as long as you want to be friends with them. And that's the only real relationship you have. That's your wife. Well, I call her my wife, but really she's just my sex buddy as long as I want her to be, until one of us gets bored and we decide to sign a piece of paper and walk away from each other. This is my kid until I don't want him anymore. Then I'm to walk away and refuse to even pay the child support to take care of this kid. This is my stepson. He's my son until I get divorced. Then he's just another weird stranger from my past. This is my best friend for the next couple of years. Then I'll replace him. He wasn't my best friend 3 years ago. He won't be my best friend in 5 years. That's common. And that's fine if your life is going great and you're having fun all the time. But if you have real problems because you're a real person and real fears on the horizon, then all that relationship, all these relationships that look so flashy, they equal nothing. They equal you are alone. When something happens, when the crap hits the fan, you can't turn to any of these people for help. They might be there for a minute. They might be there if you have a bad day. They might be there if you get in a fight with your wife. But if you get divorced and she takes the kids and you lose your job because you started drinking, they're going to look at you and be like, you're a loser, man. I don't know why I was ever your friend. And if you become too much trouble to be worth it, they're going to walk away because there's no covenant. There's none of those structures that God built into community. We just wash our hands of people nowadays. And what that happens when everybody you know can wash their hands of you is you're alone. You can't say, but you're my brother, but you're my father, but you're my friend. We've been friends since we were 3 years old. And if you're alone like that, it's like pouring nitroglycerin on the fires of fear. Because fear ultimately has to do with, I'm responsible. I'm alone to get this done. And it doesn't take away fear to have a stable family. It doesn't take away fear to have real friends that are locked in, but it makes it easier to carry. It keeps you from a full-blown panic. It keeps you from, it's like people have struggled with fear throughout all history, but it's so much worse today. And I think part of it is because we don't respect fear. We don't look at it and say, if I don't have anything worked out, if I am completely unprepared for this adversary, he will ride over me. He will take me and he will put a ring through my nose and he will lead me to Babylon. This fear has the power to utterly ruin and rule my life. We don't respect that. People today, they're just partying and they're doing their TikToks and think about all the TikTok challenges. These people don't respect fear. They don't respect danger. They're looking at it and saying life's a party. Have fun. You only have one life, right? YOLO. Let's YOLO it up until, you realize, you have one life and there's scary things that happen. There are precious things that become endangered. There's things that need some providential care, and you get yourself in a corner, and that's the worst place to have an emergency. You know where the worst place to have a heart attack is? In the middle of a rave or in a nightclub where everyone's like, I don't give a crap about this guy. It was cool when we were doing shots a minute ago, but now he's a buzzkill. Let's let him die in the corner while we go and take some Molly in the bathroom. Like nobody gives a crap about you when only people care about having fun. If it's about fun, if it's about hedonism, and it's not about loving someone the way you would want to be loved, you are alone. And fear will eat you up. I think we don't respect it. And I don't mean respect it like we have to, like respect equals some sort of relationship we're supposed to have with fear. Fear is our enemy. But you got to respect your enemy. You got to know your enemy. You can't just be like, he's not going to come over, and then every Tuesday he comes and beats the crap out of you. That's foolishness. Fear is something that we should take our time to get to know. And for Christians especially, it gets a little bit sharper. I want to read a scripture here in Revelations 21. John on the island of Patmos, he's having a vision about the end of the world. How this current epoch is going to end before we move into eternity. And he sees the world end, and he sees Satan cast down, and he sees the throne, the judgment throne of Christ, and all men, women standing before the throne being judged for what they did in the body. And those on his right are invited into his eternal kingdom, and those on his left are cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death. This is an incredible moment. Like there is no heavier reality that we face than the judgment seat. That the fact that God created you to live under his reign, and he put you in this world so that you could know both good and evil. You could decide what you want, and you could recognize me doing what I think is right always leads to evil, because self-will is the source of evil. Me surrendering to God leads to righteousness. No, even if it's a cross, even if it's this thing that kind of looks painful and scary and evil, like me getting nailed to a cross, it still leads to the righteousness of God. It still leads to incredible blessing. But no matter how good my selfishness looks, no matter how good my lust looks, it always leads into the darkness. And so John sees this moment. It's a beautiful moment. You know, this is the chapter where God's talking about, I will wipe away every tear, and there will be no more death or mourning or any of these things. And he says this in verse 6, and this is God speaking. He said unto me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes shall inherit all these things. I will be his God, and he will be my son. And this is the verse I want you guys to hear. Verse 8. But for the cowardly, for the unbelieving, for the detestable, for murderers, for sexually immoral persons, for sorcerers, for idolaters, and for all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. First thing is cowards. It's the first thing he lists. He says, if you want to understand what takes you from this life into eternal damnation, here are the things that will point out to give you a picture of it. And the first thing he says is cowardly people. The second thing he says is the unbelief. I think a lot of these translations suck. I don't know why. Like, especially when they list sin in the New Testament. They're using really old school translations. They just keep graduating them down, and we don't use language like this anymore. Like when we say unbelieving, we think, oh, unbelievers. That's not what that means. We should translate that faithless. There's plenty of believers who will be thrown into the lake of fire because they were faithless. They did not truly trust God. They said, Lord, Lord, did I not cast out demons in your name? Did I not do all these things? And he'll say, I never knew you. We never shared intimacy. You never walked through suffering with me because you were too frightened and you were too trustless. You had no trust for me to take care of you. If it wasn't safe, if you couldn't protect yourself in it, you didn't obey me. So who are you really obeying? For the cowardly, those who cannot trust God. For the detestable, my translation actually says abominable. Who uses that? Except for the snowman, nobody uses that. That's crazy. We're still update the language here, people. Detestable means a wretched stench. It's talking about in the spirit you are disgusting. In your heart you are disgusting. You're selfish and you're cruel and you don't treat other people with any love and respect and you mock God. You have this detestableness. You've covered yourself inwardly with filth. It's what Jesus says about the Pharisees. Oh, they're whitewashed tombs on the outside, but inside they're full of death and foulness. The next verse is murderers. That's a good translation. You're killing people, man. But the next one is immoral persons. You know what that word is in the original? Porneia. It's where we get the word pornography from. It's about sexual perversion. It's about using sex as a drug to please yourself. You're not using it in marriage to build the marriage, as a service to your partner to build the connection you have with your wife and to strengthen the family. Sex is the reward of marriage. It's something that's used to build up a marriage. But people steal it out and say, well, I'm just going to use it for fun. It's like stealing morphine out of the doctor's cabinet and using it to get high. No, I'm not going to use it when they have to chop off my leg. I'm just going to go and use it as a drug addict would. Sexually immoral persons. And then the one that really gets me is it says sorcerers. And I think it gets people to check out of verses like this. They go, sorcerers? What kind of archaic thing is this? They're going to be sorcerers at the end of the world? You know what that word is? Pharmakia is what it's based on. It means drug user. That's the best translation of that verse. Same word we get pharmacy from. It's saying people who indulge in drugs in such a way that it opens doors to the demonic. Maybe they're even trying to communicate with something through drugs. You don't think we have that? Joe Rogan hitting his freaking DMT pipe trying to talk to the machine elves in DMT land. People taking ayahuasca to find themselves, connect with their inner chief. That's what that's talking about. It's not talking about Merlin in a robe. It's talking about people who are trying to use drugs to open their mind and connect with the spiritual world. And then it goes on to say idolaters. You might not think there's a lot of idolaters, but what if we translated it this way? Worshippers of image. We got a few of those in the world today. All liars, all who practice deception, all of them will be cast into the lake of fire. There is no escape. There is no appeal. There is no, let's try to make this right. This is God handing you over to what you have chosen, which is an existence without any hint of God in it. The atheist thinks, I can have a godless life and it would be a beautiful thing, because he thinks, like, I would have my apartment and I would have my girlfriend and I'd have my kid and I'd have my little Frenchie bulldog and I would have my cappuccino maker and I would have my Grey's Anatomy or whatever he watches. I have all this stuff and it'll be wonderful, and sunsets and ice cream cones. Just get all that religious stuff out of here. But what the atheist doesn't know is that all of his enjoyment comes from God. It's just secondhand. That the beauty in everything in life, that the glory of God is being shouted from the stars and from the trees and from the grass, from the smile of another human being who's made in the image of God. That little puppy dog, your child cooing in the crib, all of it is good because God has blessed it and his goodness is flowing through it. And what hell is God just saying, fine, I'll let you go. If you've spent your whole life saying, leave me alone, God, I want to be my God, I want to be in charge, I don't trust you, I trust me, and everything in your life, all your fruit, dances in front of the judgment seat and says, no, he chooses himself, not you, then God goes, fine. And you step into this room, and in that room, there is no evidence for God anywhere. It's all been removed. When you look at another person, if you even see other people, I don't know exactly how hell works, but if you look at a person, you can't see the image of God in them. You can't see it in yourself. If there's stars in that world, they don't declare his glory. There is no beauty, there is no goodness, there is no joy, because those are things that are calling us to his face. Even though we turn them into idols and worship them in themselves, they were created to lead us to him. And now he says, fine, if you don't want me, then I'll pack up my stuff and leave. There's this funny, it's a weird example. There's this episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza is dating this girl. And she has this beautiful apartment, and it's filled with all this furniture. It's all velvet. He's in the velvet, giant screen TV, but she has a male roommate. And he says, get this guy out of here. I don't like this guy. And so she ditches this guy, right? You got to move out. She makes her roommate move out, and he comes into the house, and there's nothing in there. All the furniture's gone. There's no TV. They sit down on a towel to watch the Super Bowl on a TV. This baby goes, yeah, can you put some towels on the floor? This is like a 4-hour game. This is going to be really uncomfortable. You can just this is going to be so uncomfortable. But that's exactly the atheist choice. They just don't realize it. They're saying, can we get rid of God? He's a killjoy. And then he goes, okay, I'll go. And then he packs up all the stuff. And it's all the things that make existence livable, let alone enjoyable. And when he leaves and he closes that door, everything collapses into the deepest, darkest despair you could ever imagine. But here's the grossest thing about it. The second he walks out the door and closes it, you forget he even exists. Because he's just taken all the evidence, your conscience, everything just walked out that door with him. He said, you don't want me, I'll go. And that's why you can't come back from hell. It's not because God wouldn't grab you with loving arms if you repented in hell. It's because when you fully enter into hell, there's nothing left there's no moral compass. There's nothing that would ever make you think of God or point you back to God. It's just gone. All that exists is evil. All that exists is pain. And there is no escape because there is nothing else. That's all you can see. It's a terrible thing. There's a reason why we're supposed to fear and look at that in disgust. And when Jesus sits down and tells us of the things that will send us there, what's the number one thing he says? If you're a coward, there's not going to be a single coward in the kingdom of God. Hell's going to be full of them. Now the word here that is translated cowardly, there's a couple different ways they talk about fear in the New Testament. One of them, it's not this one, but it's very commonly used, is the Greek word phobos. I'm probably butchering it, but it's phobos, and it can be used negatively or positively, and it means to draw back. It's like a startle response. It's like if you were climbing up onto something, and you started to get, and then you turned around and you looked, and you realized how far you are off the ground, and you have this moment of go, wait a minute, and you stop climbing, and you have to decide, am I going to keep climbing or am I going to go down? And it makes you stop, and sometimes it can sober you up. That's why sometimes phobos is a good thing. Phobos can be the fear of the Lord. Phobos can be reverence. Phobos can be something that makes you stop and soberly judge what you're doing. Like, this is fun, but all of a sudden it got real. All of a sudden it got real. Do I really want to do this? Do I really want to sin against God? Do I really want to turn my back on what he's offering me? So it can be a good thing. It could also be a bad thing. It could also be Peter denying Christ 3 times, because every time somebody asks him, wait, you know Jesus, right? You should be getting crucified with him. No. This shock pushes him back. But the word that's used here, I don't know if I should even try to pronounce it. I don't butcher it. It's like delios, something like that. And it's a different word. And it's never used positively in the entire New Testament. And most of the time when they translate it like they do here. Cowardice, coward, cowardly. Because it doesn't mean having a startle. It's not like somebody jumps out from behind a bush and you go, whoa! And you get scared for a second. Cowardice is you turn and you flee from your fear and you don't stop. It's that you are driven by fear, is what it means. It is a fear that robs you and makes you weak-hearted and fearful, and you're running and you live a life of avoidance. And fear is like a bunch of cowboys herding you through the prairie wherever they want you to go, until one day you get ran off the cliff into the lake of fire. And Satan's he's just a cowboy, and that fear is the whip he's cracking, and you're just a dumb cow he's driving along the way that doesn't know better. That's the situation. That's how crazy and dangerous and wild fear is. It's why it's so important that we understand what fear is. Now let me ask another question. What do you think the most common command in Scripture is, given from heaven, through angels, through anybody, coming from heaven to earth? Fear not. Smart guy. Fear not. Do not let your hearts be troubled. My peace I give to you, my peace I leave with you. Do not be anxious for anything, but in all things with prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, make your needs known unto God, and the peace of God, which transcends understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. This is what we hear in Scripture over and over again. Not only does God say, don't do that, you'll go to hell, he also consistently points to the opposite thing. He says, this is what you should be like. You should have peace in your heart. What God is consistently saying, and this is in the culture, this is what they say in the opening of almost every book of the New Testament. Peace be with you. This is the language of the church. This is the language of the Hebrew culture the church originally came out of. Like we just talked about, Philippians 4, be anxious for nothing. Offer any concerns that pop up. You're going to have phobos for a moment. You're going to have some things that knock you back and you go, whoa, this is serious. That's not sinful necessarily. It's how you respond to it. You have to recognize danger. That's reverence. That's the fear of the Lord. That's just counting the cost and common sense. You're going to have moments that make you take your breath away for a second. But the question is, what do? Are you driven into a place of cowardly flight and hiding, or cowardly working? I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to plan. I'm going to fix it. Or do you take that concern and you lift it up to God in prayer and petition with thanksgiving? I know you got this, God, but You commanded me to lift up all my issues and to roll my anxieties and my worries onto your shoulders. And what does God promise in return? The peace of God that transcends all understanding to guard your heart and mind. We don't understand. God has offered us peace. That's what you're supposed to be in. Peace, not fear. Peace. And they're contrary to one another. We don't understand what peace is. I think we think peace is a calm feeling. We think peace is calm, a sense of calm. And so, if your life is falling apart, your wife left you, the doctor said you have 3 months to live, you're like in fear, but then you pop a Xanax, and the fear melts away, and you're all, oh, and you're like, I'm so peaceful right now. You are not full of peace. You're intoxicated. There's a difference. You're unaware of your fear. You've shoved it down to a place where you can't feel it. That's not the same thing. Biblically, peace, if you go back to the idea of shalom, Hebraic peace, is something that's over your life, not over your heart and mind only. It's over your whole life. It's not an illusion that everything's okay. It's the reality that everything's okay. What shalom means is nothing missing, nothing broken. It means you literally look at your life and say, I'm good. There's nothing to be afraid of here. That's peace. It's not that I'm doped up somehow or distracted or I'm so focused or locked into something that I'm unaware. It's like I'm looking at the whole thing and it's cool. Think about what it means when God says, I will give you my peace. When Jesus says, my peace I leave with you. What is the peace of God like? Is it God getting high so he's not aware of the world's problems? No, God knows everything all the time. But he has this incredible peace. Why? Because he looks down at it and says, it's all going according to my will. Now we might look at, wait a minute, like sin, hell, that's your will? Sort of. In the sense that God made a man decision. Men have to make decisions sometimes where they go, this is going to suck, it's not going to be fun, but in the long run it's the right choice. There are times when you sit there and say, man, yeah, we're going to have to take that kid's pacifier and it's going to suck and this kid's going to be blowing his freaking top, but we got to do it. We got to do it. And you make that move and you push through it. We're going to potty train this kid. We're going to take her diapers away and we're going to be cleaning up crap for the next 2 weeks probably, but we got to do it. And you make a man decision. There's discipline, there's pain, but you're not fearful. It's not going your way necessarily, but it is the way you've chosen to work with the situation at hand. God looked at creation and he said, I don't want robots. I want people that love me because they choose to. And part of that deal is that people are going to sin, they're going to hurt each other, and there's going to be a hell at the end of it for the people who just refuse to accept what God is offering. That's the deal. And God said, okay. God said that's worth the cost to have the church in eternity, to have a creation that loves me for who I am and out of its true free heart it's doing. Not because I programmed it to, but because it can recognize my goodness on its own. And so when God looks out, he sees a lot of things that are tough. He sees a lot of crosses that he's actively carrying in the universe. He sees, he's crying out and suffering and bleeding for people. Right now, God is in the midst of our pain. But he can still, and it's a lot of discipline. It's a lot of tough stuff. But God can look at the whole thing and say it's in service to my will. It's all going the way I knew it would from the foundation of the earth. There's nothing missing that is supposed to be here. There is nothing broken. Everything that should be running the way that it's running is running that way. There's nothing taking my plan off course. God never wakes up and goes, oh my goodness, nobody's going to get saved. The whole thing went on, I never saw this coming, and that never happens. God wakes up. He doesn't even wake up, to be honest, but he looks out at eternity every day. He looks out at all of creation and says, it's exactly how I knew it would be. I planned for all of this. I've angled it all. It's all going to the goodness. It's all going to the eternity of bliss. It's going to the place where it's supposed to be. That's God's peace. You can look at it and say, There's nothing missing. There's nothing broken. It's all happening the way it's supposed to be. There's hardship. There's pain. But there's no reason to fear. God's not afraid of any of it. And then God turns to you and says, here's my peace. It's not the peace of him making you God so you can sit there and say, I'm in control over the universe. Everything's going my way. No, it's the peace of knowing that God is God over the universe. And there's nothing that's going not his way. It's the peace. This is how Jesus gives us his peace. He says, everything will go in your life exactly the way it's supposed to if you will yield to my rule. He said, well, if you choose sin and you go to hell, that's according to my will. If you choose righteousness and go to heaven, that's according to my will too. But he's saying, Danny, if you choose to submit to me, there is nothing that can snatch you out of my hand. If you submit to me, there is nothing that can ruin my will for your life. Nothing. I'm in control. The only thing I'm not in control of is your will. Because I gave it to you. And I could take it back, but I'm not going to. I'm not a liar. I'm not a thief. I gave it to you. You can make your own call. But if you throw in with me, then you're flowing in this will and there's nothing that can stop it. That's the peace that God gives. No matter what it looks like. Maybe you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, but you're still going to end up over there exactly where you belong. And when you get there, you will look back at God's plan and say it was perfect. That there was nothing missing in it, that there was nothing broken in it. It was exactly the path you needed to walk to end up in the fulfillment of who you are in eternity. That's the peace that God offers. But you know what Satan does? You know why we don't have that peace? Satan comes up and says, it's not real. He comes up and says either God's not in control, chaos is in control, or he says God doesn't really love you. He only loves you if you're doing the right thing. He only loves you if you've got it together. You're not all the things you need to be for God to be trustworthy. You can't trust him. Who does he say you have to trust? You got to trust you. You got to take here, give me that gift that God gave you. Give it to me. Give me that peace. Here, take this fear. This fear will keep you on your toes. This fear will motivate you. This fear is the one thing. It's the one thing that's going to keep you. It's like a soldier taking stims to fly through missions and stay awake for a long time. It's like, here, take this crazy drug so you can do a blitzkrieg attack. Yeah, it'll kill you eventually, but just take it. You need it. Satan comes up and says, fear is actually your friend. It's actually the only voice you can trust. It's the only one who's going to tell you about the danger and keep you on point. That's the choice that stands before us. Satan says, let me chase you around with this whip. I'll keep you from the danger. I'll chase you away from the danger. You just keep running from the fear, and I'll keep driving you away from it. You submit to me like a slave, and my slave you will be. God is saying, you don't need to be afraid of anything. The only thing you should fear is taking yourself back from me, which is exactly what you do when you grab hold of that fear. That's exactly the decision you're making. I don't trust you, God. I trust me and fear to get this done. I don't trust peace and you to get it done. Me letting go and letting you do it is not a solution to me. Me being frightened and getting to work is a solution that I believe in. That's you taking yourself right out of the reign of God, saying, nope, the reign of Danny, the reign of Philip is back on. We have a state of emergency. I'm taking it back. That's what Satan's after, right? He can't steal the kingdom by force. He's got to get you to give it up willingly. He's got to be able to tell you a story, tell you a lie that motivates you to hand him the throne. Because he can't take that away from Jesus. Only you can take that away from Jesus. You're the only one who has the authority to say, Jesus, I don't want you in my life. Satan can't do it for you. He can't get in there. He's got to convince you. He's got to be like Grima Wormtongue in the Lord of the Rings, whispering in the king's ear. Don't let him in. Don't let him bring the staff into the throne room. He's got to get into your heart and convince you to kick God out of your life, because he can't actually stop God. The cowardly are people who have been swindled by Satan. Everything's been stolen from them. And the promise of peace that they thought their fear, that feeding that fear, that planning constantly for every possible eventuality would bring them, it never happens. It just gets worse and worse. The more they feed the fear, the bigger it grows. The more they live their life in cowardice. And you know what's going to happen? At some point you're going to realize all the places God's trying to lead me, my fears are standing right in the way of me going there, and I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't go to those places. Maybe some of us, even right now, we're saying, man, that's right. I know that's right. I can see that. But here's the truth. I don't know how to get the peace of God. I don't know if I ever opened that package. Like maybe Jesus handed it to me. Maybe I handed it back to Satan. I don't know if I even really opened that package. I don't know if I ever understood it. But I know this. I'm a slave to fear now. And that's a hard thing, especially I'm a man, obviously. Well, maybe it's not that obvious nowadays, but as a man, it's hard to admit fear. I use other words like a little bit anxious or worried, or I'm stressed out. Stressed out is my favorite. I think, we minimize it because we know inside being a coward is not a good thing. And that's ultimately what that stuff boils down to. If it's really taken over our lives, is we're getting into a place of avoidance. I'm just trying to avoid the things that scare me. I don't want to go and face them. I want to slip to the side and get away. I thought I had some conception of what fear was, what peace was, what courage was. And then I went into this week, like last week, Danny gave this sermon. And I was in that place I was talking about earlier where you're not in fear, you haven't been in fear in a minute, so you don't think you need help so much. I was like, this is a good message. And you're right, we should go up and go to God and say that, but I wasn't feeling the need. I was just looking at it and recognizing what the Holy Spirit was doing, saying, okay, Lord, I'll go up and get this prayer. And I did it, and it was good, but it wasn't earth-shattering. I wasn't thinking anything about it. Then I walked into this week, and it was like Satan had a bag of pennies and he just like whacked me in the face like right on Monday. And it wasn't that I was like crippled in panic or anything like that. I think it could easily go there, but if you get isolated enough, I think that's what happens. But it was just like Satan was showing me in how many places he rules through fear in my life, through stress, whatever I call it, but that's what's going on. How he can grind me down. And sometimes, the direct assault doesn't work. Like Satan can't, we think of fear and cowardice, we think of a bully standing up and we're so afraid to fight the bully that we run away and hide. That's what we think of. But cowardice also works on the basis of just getting punked out and stressed out, and he's just flinching on you all the time. And then after like a month of that, you just crumble because of exhaustion, because of emotional exhaustion, and you stop showing up to work, and you stop really doing the things that you should be doing. You got no power. You've been bled out by the effect of stress, by the effect of fear. They call it burnout, right? But it's cowardice. It's just cowardice by another name. It just means you were afraid to really go after what God had for you with intensity because of your fear. You're trying to find a way around the obstacle, and you keep getting punked by the enemy and moving around this way and this way and this way, trying to get around. And eventually, between the fear and the constant wandering and the complete lack of success that would truly feed you, to stand in courage and win a fight that would feed your heart, you're denying yourself that. So eventually you just crumble. Like Elijah after Jezebel starts chasing him. He's like, just let me die already. That deep weight of crushedness that comes over us when we're not correctly facing and handling our fears. So I started to talk to God about it. It was one of those situations where it's kind of like he was letting Satan hang himself, but giving him the rope, letting him hang himself by showing all this stuff. And then he was pulling me back into a little bit more of a peaceful place. I was still fearful, but he was pulling me back. and saying, don't you want to talk about this? Do you want to run and hide? Do you want to get on the hamster wheel of, I'm going to handle this? Or do you want to talk to me about it and actually get it fixed? And eventually, I'm not saying I did the right thing the first time, but eventually I was like, I want to get this fixed. And I went to God. And this is what God told me. This is incredible. It's one of those things where you go, and then all of a sudden you start looking at it more and go, no, that's really smart, actually. Man, God, you know what you're talking about. And then you realize what you're saying, and you feel like an idiot. What did I think? You didn't know what he was talking about?
Yeah.
But what he said to me is that fear makes two claims on us. It comes in and it throws these two things at us. And the first is, you're responsible. You're responsible for this. What happens when you get a phone call, like we were talking about at the beginning, your daughter has been hit by a car, get to the hospital, she might be dying. And you jump in the car, and what are you doing? You're trying to get there super fast. Why? Because for some reason you think that might help. You're praying like you've never prayed. Oh God, please, you're begging. You're saying, God, I will go live in a box in Calcutta and preach the gospel to my final days. Just don't take my daughter. And you're just throwing everything you can. What are you doing? What are you living out? What truth are you living out of that situation? You're living out of the truth that you were responsible, that you are responsible for whether she lives or dies. It's on you. So do something. Do something, or be so freaked out by the responsibility that you can't handle that you run and bury your head in the sand with the horrible truth that I'm responsible. Fear always says that. It says you're responsible to do this thing and you can't do it. That's the fear. When you were a kid lying in bed at night thinking that robbers might break in and kidnap you or kill you or something like that because your mom let you watch a movie you shouldn't have watched or something. And you're sitting there in bed and you're thinking about it, you've got your covers pulled up to here. What are you thinking? You're thinking, I'm responsible to keep them from getting me. What am I going to do? Am I going to hide under my bed? Do I put the covers over my head to keep me safe? And you're thinking about, how can I protect myself? But the truth is, you can't. That's what I'm saying. You're responsible to keep yourself safe from the burglars, but you can't do it. And that's where fear has you, just ripping your heart out. Now, imagine if you had a healthy relationship with your parents. Not saying that anybody's got this going on, but imagine you had a really great dad. And when you thought that, your first thought was, I'm not responsible to keep me safe. That's my dad's job. And he can do it. And you just had utter child faith that there's nobody in the world that could beat up my dad. I'm totally safe. It would totally change it, right? Go in bed, what would happen? You might even have fun with the idea. What would happen if burglars broke in the house? I would get to see Dad kick those burglars' butts. Like Bruce Lee, just take them out. And you'd think that'd be kind of cool, actually. There'd be no fear. Because fear's first thing is to say, you're responsible for this. And I get it. That it just seems like we're responsible, right? That's where I got kind of stuck. Because there's fears like, I'm responsible to pay my rent. And I can't do it. And that's why I'm afraid. And you go, well, you are responsible to pay your rent. I'm responsible to protect my kid. I'm responsible to do this. I'm responsible to do that. But I want to ask two questions. One, is that a responsibility God ever gave you? And number two, is it actually something you can really do? Really think about it. In the Garden of Eden, did God create people and say, okay, Adam, your job is to pay for the place that you live, and if you can't do it, you're going to get thrown out? That never happened. There's nothing in the Bible where they went to man and they said, hey, it's your job to protect and to provide and to do. No. From the beginning, God said, those are my jobs. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to provide with you. I'm going to be with you in every situation of your life. I'm going to take care of all of it. Just trust me, I'll take care of it. And then the fall happened. What was the fall? What was the really fall? What did the serpent say? God, you can't really trust God to take care of you. You got to take care of you. You need to take responsibility for what you need. And what you need is that apple over there. Don't trust him, trust you. What do your senses tell you? Look at that apple. Does that look good to you? Go pick it. Go take a bite. You can't trust him to take care of you. And so they fall. Now I also want you to think about it. Do you really have the power to do any of the things that you think you're responsible for? Like you're in that car running to the hospital to save your daughter's life. You're going to get there, and what are you going to do? Even if you were a doctor, can you save everybody? Can you keep your daughter alive forever? Can you give her eternal life? What about providing? We think, oh, I go out and I get a good job and I make a ton of money and I'm stacking it up. And then guess what? Major depression comes along. But you think the people who lived through the depression were like bad guys? They were just, oh, it was just a whole nation of derelict fathers and lazy good-for-nothings. No, these guys were some hard freaking workers, man. They were raised by the pioneers, man, and cowboys, and they were some hard people. But when the farmland turns to dust and blows away and the market collapses and your money isn't worth, all the work that you turned into money and now it's worth nothing. And you run to find a job to earn more money, nobody's hiring. I mean, you can't feed your kids. You're driving around, you're digging garbage out of things to feed them. Were you ever really in control? Or was that a lie you told yourself? I can do this. See, the truth is God put Adam in the garden and he said, this fruit is for you. Right? He gave Adam a job. You can pick the fruit. You can eat it. You trust me for it. Can't find the fruit? Come to me. I'll tell you where it is. It's not that God's like, I'm going to beam the food into your stomach with a teleporter. No, he gave him a piece of the job. But the truth was, the real job was his. He even said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to let you garden the garden. I'll let you pull weeds and stuff. But honestly, it was never on Adam to sit there and worry and say, I am responsible for all the life in this garden and that it would produce the fruit and it would feed my family. And if I screw up and I don't pull the weeds right, we're all going to starve and die. It was never like that until Satan came in. There wasn't fear there until Satan came in. And his lie was twofold. Just like God was saying, you're responsible for this. And you can't do it. You take that, you drink it down, you're screwed. Now, where this took me in my mind, which is interesting when God takes you on these things, is something that we work on in the men's group here. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but what we've been working on in the men's group is studying masculinity from a biblical perspective. We use a lot of different sources for information. We pray it through and we work it out. It's kind of like panning for gold a little bit. But we do a lot of psychological stuff too. And one of the things that was really heavy, God really used it a lot, was going through the masculine archetypes, specifically the developmental archetypes. How a boy grows up into being a man and how we kind of ignore that stuff nowadays. We don't follow it. We twist it. We take kids down the wrong path, and we can see it's like, what those archetypes would predict to happen is happening. Like if you take a kid, you take this away from him, that's what's going to happen. And that's basically just archetypes is about studying our instincts. Like how are we programmed to behave? That doesn't mean we don't have free will. It just means we have a sense inside of us of how we're supposed to be. You have a sense of whether you're being a true man or not. And if people teach you and your culture says you can't be a true man and you live in betrayal of your masculinity, you're going to have this alarm going off in the side. I'm not really a man. I'm not really a man. I'm not really a man. It's not good for you. Like God created you to follow those instincts under his rulership. He's the king. But your instincts are a steward over you to some degree that God has set. Anyways, what it brought to mind is there's these developmental archetypes. And I started looking at them and thinking that has to tie into the issue of fear. That has to be something that we learn how to handle as a kid. And as I started looking at it, God was pointing out things, and I realized, like, dang, this is like right on the nose. Like right on the nose stuff. So when you're first born, you're a little tiny baby, like my son is right now, just a few months old. You can't really give anything back. You know, you're a baby. You poop, that's what you do. You poop, you cry all night, that's what you do. But that's not how we're wired to be. God created us to be blessings to each other and to Him, to give. We're created to give, even more than we're created to take anything. And there are alarm bells that go off inside of a person when they're living in a position where they're taking, and they're not aware of giving anywhere. It's not good. It screws people up. There's a man, he loses his job, he's sitting at home. It's not good for him. He might dream about, if I lost my job, I'd finally be able to relax, we got savings, or my wife can handle it, she's making enough money. But he actually gets in that situation and there's just alarm bells going off the whole time because he knows he's supposed to contribute on an instinctual level. And he might be doing that, but if he can't see that, if that doesn't seem real, if society is saying that's not really contributing, it'll bother him, it'll screw with him. And the same thing is true even when you're a little baby. You're wired to give back to your family, but you can't. It doesn't work because you're too small. You can't do anything. And so there are instincts built into us. And the first archetype illustrates those. It's called the golden child. And it's essentially that there's an instinctual knowledge that, like, your gold inside is how we would say it. There's something of great value about you that's worth investing in. It's like there's gold in them hills, so we're going to go and we're going to dig and we're going to pan, and it's worth all that investment. It's worth all the venture capital we're going to throw at it because there's gold in there. And the same idea is like there's gold in this kid. There's gold in this kid, and it's in the child's instincts. But it's also in the parent's instincts. When a mother looks down at her baby, she can see his gold. And she's just like, what a precious child I have. When a father looks at a baby, he goes, that's my kid, and he can see the gold. And that's how, that's how that operates. Getting a little warm in here. Actually click this thing, see if I can get it going a little faster. Totally not sure how many clicks. Yeah, I think that's it. Sorry. Anyways, like I was saying, there's this these instincts that power up at infancy, and this is just basic archetypal psychology, and I don't buy hook, line, and sinker into psychology, mainly because it ignores God a lot, and I think if you ignore the wisdom of God, your science isn't going to be that great. But at the same time, I believe we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We should be lifting these things up before God. So anyways, there's the archetype of the golden child, as we call it. And it means that when the parents look at a baby, they have instincts inside of them, God-given instincts inside of them that say, this baby is worth it. Even though he can't contribute, even though he can't do anything, they sense the image of God in him, so to speak. And they look down at him and they go, what a blessing this little boy is. Even though he can't really actually bless them. They know that there's something there. And for the mother, her instinct is to build a nest around that kid and just smother him with love and affection. Not smother, but mother him. Mother him with love and affection, pour it out on him. And if she's balanced and she's following her instincts correctly, she doesn't have trauma or lies from the devil in her head screwing it up, then she will polish his gold. she will make him trust his innate sense that he has value. That's what will happen. He'll know it's gold. If she over polishes, then he'll think, this isn't gold. This is God, baby girl. I'm a God. If your mom is worshiping you, it will push you into self-worship, and you become what they call the high chair tyrant, where you're like, feed me, I am God, bring me my food, I don't like this, too cold, throw it off the high chair, blah, and you're freaking out. And it's because you've been over polished. Like, it's not that you've been over loved, but there's been too much submissive, worshipful kind of love going towards you. They've over-polished the gold. You're getting bloated in your way of seeing yourself. And this is as a baby that this happens. The opposite is if they don't polish you enough. And maybe they're abusive. Maybe, what the hell's wrong with you? Stop crying, you stupid baby. They're mean to you. And then it makes you doubt that inner sense that there's something good about you. Instead of thinking you're gold or thinking you're God, you think you're garbage. And so it can go any of these ways. This is kind of an idea of how archetypes work there. And so that develops kind of a nest, and you're growing up in this nest, and people are taking care of you. And the way that you can handle the fact that you're being taken care of, think about it. They're washing your butt. They're feeding you from the breast. They're cleaning you up. Like, everything is somebody else doing it for you. You're not wired to work that way as a human being. You're a miniature man being treated as a baby. That shouldn't fit. But it does if you have this warm little sense of, but I'm worth it. I'm worth it, and I'm worth the investment, and I'm worth being have all this stuff put into me. That's an important thing to have, to be able to receive. Anything that comes later in life is to have that sense, I'm worth the investment. I'm not God. It's not worship. I'm not worth worship, but I'm worth an investment because I'm made in the image of God. I'm not garbage. And that's that balancing place. Then later on, we have this other archetype that powers up. It's other instincts that we call the prodigy. And the prodigy is all about a kid getting old enough to learn things. And the golden child's all about mama. She's the one who builds the nest. But the prodigy is all about papa. And papa builds the test. He builds the thing. He invites you out. There's a point where you grow up a little bit and your instincts start saying, I'm bored with this nest. I'm sick of sitting around sucking on a boob all day. I want to get out and see the real world. And you want to get out. And you feel the call. And when you look out into the world, you see Dad, and he's like, I am the one who goes into the wilderness of crazy things in this life and conquers it. And you go, I want to follow that guy. And Mom, we all know when this happens, because it's like Dad comes home from work and forget you, Mom. The kids run, Dad! And they're just like, take me on an adventure. Make my life interesting. And the father is wired a little bit different. The mother sees the gold, and she just wants to polish it. She doesn't have there's nothing else in it. Now, she might bring other things to the table and what she's learned and decisions she's made and values she's picked up consciously, by conscious choice. But when it comes to her instincts are, you just love the heck out of the kid because look at how wonderful he is. That's it. A father, when he looks at the kid, again, he could have good things or bad things going on consciously in the way he judges things. But his instincts are going to say, look at the gold in this kid. I'm going to teach him how to make it shine. Like the mother just says, the mother will look at it and be like, I can't believe people can't see how awesome my kid is. They're literally stuck, like it's a cognitive dissonance issue. They would never think my kid isn't shining. They would think everybody's blind. What the hell's wrong with all these people? They would never think that it has anything to do with their kid. They will always think it's something wrong with the world, that they can't see how great it is, because they don't understand that other people don't have mother goggles on. But a father, it's like he's only got one goggle. Like he can see the gold, but he can also realize that this kid is not shining. He's not blossoming. He's not bringing this stuff out. It's hidden inside of him. And so a father's role is almost like prophetic, where he says, I know what's in you, and I'm going to be the guy who reminds you of it when you're scared, or when you are doubtful, in all those moments when you wouldn't believe who you really are, I'm going to remind you and I'm going to call you forth. And I'm going to put little tiny tests at first, and they're gradually going to get more powerful, but I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to take you into situations and we're going to get that gold out where you can see it. It's not just other people telling you. It's not just mama saying, you're a precious little boy. It's you seeing like, I got it. I got the power. I got the strength. And you're going to grow into manhood. And as if, all this stuff is usually horribly botched. So don't feel bad if you're like, that's not what happened to me. It never really happens to anybody. It's always off. But that's how it's supposed to go. Like, if Adam and Eve had kids in Eden and the fall didn't happen, that's what it would have looked like. And what happens in that situation is dad is leading you out into adventure, but then you go back to mom to rest in the nest. It's like test and then rest in the nest, test and then rest. You're going back and forth. And what happens eventually is it doesn't fit to be in the nest anymore because the nest is built for a baby. So you run to the nest to get cleaned up, right? You run to the nest when you're injured. You run to the nest, this is where it ties in, when you're afraid. So as a little tiny kid, you have mama. And when you're with mama in the nest, there's no scary things in the nest. It's like just a warm bosom with food and you're sleeping and cooing and woo. There's nothing scary in the nest. That's your whole world, and the world outside just kind of fades away. But then you get bored there, right? So you go out with dad, and there's tons of scary things out where dad's at, but you feel safe because dad's like protecting you from them. But then what does dad do? He says, I'm not going to protect you from everything. I'm going to protect you from everything but this test that is the right size for you right now. And if you start understanding this, you will understand why they call God the Father in the Bible, because this is exactly what he does. He's also the mother. He nests you and brings you into these wonderful places, but then he calls you out, and it's scary, but you go, God will protect me. And he goes, I will protect you, except right now in this test, I'll let you fall off the bicycle because you got to learn. I'll let you fall down because you got to learn to walk. I'm not going to let you whack your head and kill yourself, but I'm going to let you get hurt a little bit if necessary to learn this. And so the father relationship is really where a kid starts coming in contact with fear. And some fathers, it's a lot of fear, and he's throwing you in the deep end of the pool to try to teach you to swim. Sometimes he's just beating the crap out of you because he hates your innocence, because he's psychologically screwed up. Like, there's a whole gambit of kinds of fathers that are out there. By the way, happy Father's Day. There's a lot of different kinds. But an archetypically perfect father would be gauging those tests in the wisdom of God to that kid's needs to grow and to stretch and to believe what is inside of him. And that's exactly what God does, where he says, you know how when we're in the secret place and I'm mothering you and I coo these prophecies over your life and the gold inside of you and how precious you are, and you go, yeah, those are real nice. Go, okay, now we're going to go outside and we're going to put it to the test and see if that gold is inside of you. And you go, I'm terrified. No, don't worry, we're going to do a little tiny test. It's just going to take you right over that edge of I'm super uncomfortable, but I'm not going to overwhelm you. It's not going to be more than you can handle. And you do it. And the first couple of tests are so easy, you pass them on accident. You couldn't not pass them. It's like the father says, we're going to go and work on our walking. And the first thing we're going to do is just sit there. Good job, son, you're sitting there. It's like so easy you can't fail. But then when you get into even the slightly bigger test, what? You're falling, you're scraping your knee, you're touching failure. And that's where all of a sudden, in the midst of this place, this is where fear can come in. Because fear comes in and says, you're responsible to walk good. You don't walk good. And you can't walk good. And then you run, you're like, right? You're learning it from your dad. And there's some part of you that says, it's my job to figure out how to walk. Dad's expecting me to figure out how to walk on my own. I don't know how to do it. I can't do it. And it's so horrible that where do you run? You run to mom. And what does mom do? Mom says, well, don't worry about that out there. One day, they'll see how awesome you are without you doing anything, which is not true. It's just one of those common lies that just pop out of mothers' mouths. Don't worry, one day they'll see. It's on them that they can't see how great you are. And then she pulls you in, and what does she do? What does a mother do when a kid's in? Like a little tiny kid gets hurt, what do? Scoops him up. I have a son who's, 4 months now? 4 months, almost 5. What do you do in that situation when your kid's upset, your kid gets hurt? You scoop him up, you cool him, you get in this place, and then breastfeeding, she'll pull out the boob, drinks the milk. That's actually packed with melatonin. This kid's getting milk high. You ever see a milk drunk baby? It's actually a drug hitting him, and he passes out. That's the first way you deal with fear when you're growing up. The first way you deal with fear is you run away from it to mama, and mama cocoons you in this distraction that says that's far away, it doesn't exist, forget about it, and you nurse and you suckle some good things, and you surround yourself, and then you just numb out to it. And that is perfectly fine if you are 4 months old. But if you're 35 years old, it's not anymore. But you will see a lot of guys that have never grown out of that archetype in that way. When the prodigy never set right. And so when they either avoid any test that they know they can't, that they not sure they, unless it's something they know they can ace it, they don't do it. I'm not going to do that unless I know I'm going to win. And if they do get caught in a situation, which no matter how good you are at avoiding, eventually you're going to get caught in failure. What do they run to? Probably not their actual mother. That would be pretty incestuous. Most guys aren't going to do that. There's some out there. But most guys are going to run to something to mother them. It might be bedding a woman. It might be tipping back a bottle. It might be popping a gummy. It might be... I know guys that any bad news happens, they will literally... Someone calls Nana's dead and they go take a nap. It's like they were fine a minute ago and they instantly go to bed. And all of those are nesting instincts. I'm going to go and I'm going to lock myself away from the world, and I'm just going to try to zone out. Could be TV, could be video games, but it's like I'm going to numb myself out from it. This is how I'm going to handle my fear. And what is that? The world says you're responsible, but you have a twisted voice. And maybe your mom actually said this, maybe you just interpreted it this way. Either way, it's a lie. You say, I'm not even supposed to be doing that. The outside world isn't even for me. The test? No, I don't want the test. I want the nest. I should have never left the nest. And that's a lie. But there are guys out there and they're living for the weekend. They're trying to make things happen. They're just like, I just want to rebuild my mom nest without my mom, with all these nice hedonistic things. And then I'll do what I have to do out here, but it's all about retreating back to this embryonic stage. And it's not fulfilling, it's horrible, you're never going to fulfill your destiny. And God, that's cowardice, right? That's obvious that that's what that is at that point. But it gets heavier than that. Because what does your dad teach you to do in the prodigy when you fall down? He's going to let you run to mom at first, but eventually he's going to be like, hey, Kato, we can't run to mom every time you scrape your knee. But I failed. Have you ever seen a kid in baseball? You ever been to a Pee-wee baseball game and a kid strikes out and he's just like, he's just flipping out because he has this destiny of hitting the ball out and everyone, oh, look at him, he got a home run. That's what he wants. And he gets up there and he's trying to get it and he just fails and he gets struck out. And you can just see the failure crushing him. And what's going on inside of his head? His fear is there, and his fear is confirmed. That fear was in his head saying, hold on, you're responsible to hit this out of the park, but you're not going to. And then it happens, and he's crushed. What does a father do in that situation? He comes up and says, everybody fails. Everybody falls down. It's not the end. Failure isn't fatal. Isn't that what people say? Failure isn't fatal, man. It's okay. We all do it. It's not super embarrassing. It happens to everybody. And what you do now determines what kind of a man you'll be. Will you be a man? Get up and try again. Learn, grow, try again. Anything worth having takes some work. These are the lessons that a father teaches in that phase. And they're lessons against fear to some degree. Because what do we take from that? We go, number one, which isn't really part of the lesson, but this is again how we hear it. We go, I am responsible for this. Satan comes up with the fear and he says, you're responsible to be good at this stuff. You know, you're responsible to get A's in school. You're responsible to protect your sister from bullies on the schoolyard. And we go, I am responsible. That's what it means to be a man. I am responsible. But then when the devil says you can't, you go, nope. I can do anything. And you take this Band-Aid called bravado and you slap it over that part of the thing. Where it says I can't, you slap a Band-Aid that says I can do anything. And you hear it a lot, right? You hear it in movies. I remember growing up watching Back to the Future. You can accomplish anything you put your mind to. You know, it's very common. It can be anything. You grow up, be whatever you want to be. It's a very common thing. And that's kind of how the prodigy lands if it's going right. And that's why, you know, cockiness is usually kind of gross, except if it's like at a perfect age of like a barely like prepubescent boy. When they're cocky, everybody likes it. You know, yeah, man. You know, there's just like some kid who's like, I can do this, and you're like, there's no way in hell you can do that. You're a little kid, but he just totally believes like, I got this, you know? Whether it's trying to do a cannonball in a pool or whatever, and you're just like, what? But when you see that cocky, fearless, like, I am bulletproof and immortal energy in that age group, it feels right. Why? Because that's where you're supposed to be. That's part of your journey. That's how you respond correctly to your father's instruction. Is he says you can do anything, you believe it. Now, where does this eventually go? And again, wait, let me pause on this. But you can see people who've never grown past that, right? Because when fear shows up and it says they're responsible, they go, hell yeah, I am. And it says you can't do it, and you go, I can do anything. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be like your business is failing. You don't have any money. You're responsible for your business and it's failing. And you go, no, it's not. It will never fail. Nothing can make it fail because I'm always going to win. I will always win. Nothing can stop me. And it's that cockiness and that bravado from being a kid, but it never developed. So you'll find people that do both. You find the hiders. They're looking for the boob somewhere. They're trying to hide and zone out. And then you have people who are the testers. They're the people that when fear comes knocking, they say, I'm going to fight it. It's like a guy who was taught by his dad, don't be a coward, don't run from a fight. And he's taken that so far into his head that literally someone could show up that's like 800 pounds of pure muscle. And the guy picks up a cow and rips it in half. And he goes, I'm going to fight him. I'll fight him. I'll fight anybody. It's just like, what? You're an idiot. Don't fight that guy. But it's like you can't say no. That's how I've always handled my fear, with bravado. I can do anything. I'll just put me to work. I can do it. I can do it. Put me in, coach. Put me in. I can handle it. I don't run away. I run in. But you're still running. You're still driven by that fear, even if it's driving you forward. It's still what's driving you. It's still your fuel, and it's still why you fail, and it's still why you burn out, and it's still why you're broken. You might think, I'm not a coward, I run into the fight. When I get scared, I just jump in. And that's why you jump in stupid and unprepared and get waylaid, because you're so afraid you can't do it the right way. You can't slow down and let God into that situation because you're handling your fear. Why? Probably because your dad dropped the ball in training you. And he gave you the wrong lesson. Now what eventually happens in these two archetypes is eventually you got to cut the mom's apron string, right? You can't keep going back to the nest. You're like 35 years old and breastfeeding from your mom. Make me feel good, Mom. I felt bad today. You can't do it, right? It'd be gross. Be something wrong with your mom and something wrong with you that was still going on, right? Both of you start getting the sense you're growing out of this, boy. We're going to have to let it go. And it's unfortunate because a lot of mothers, you know, they don't let it go. You know, if you're looking at your kid as he really is, if you're not hiding in your imagination from the fact that your son's growing up, it will let go. The instincts will naturally let go, and you will begin to develop a relationship with your son based on who he is, and you'll start treating him as a man instead of as a boy. And that starts as treating him as a boy, because mothering is always towards an infant. That's where the mothering instinct goes. You want to turn him into a little baby. And even as a little boy, you're like, I'm a boy now, but you got to be a little baby to hang out with mom. That relationship's going to be super screwed up. That kid's going to have to reject you to escape the nest, because you keep pulling him in and forcing him to pretend like he's a little baby bird, spit the worm in his mouth. He's beyond that now. And so that's where moms can get screwed up. They want to keep the kid as a baby. And at some point, if they're not, and this is what they do, is they use their imagination to hold on to the kid as a baby, even though he's obviously not a baby anymore. And you can meet mothers, their kid is like delivering mail for UPS, but he's still a baby in their head. And that's why they have a weird relationship. That's why he doesn't come over to visit. Because you treat him like a little baby. It's not good. So if you let go of that and you accept the fact my kid is getting older, and you're looking at the person in front of you instead of the memory in your mind, then it's going to very naturally let go. It's going to feel weird to try to baby him, and you go with that. And that apron string gets cut naturally. And that's what that kid should want, unless something's getting screwed up, he's getting traumatized, and he goes, screw the test, I want to live in the nest for the rest of my life. That's not going to, outside of that, he's going to want to go that way. But what happens when that string gets cut is all of a sudden it's like an anchor. It was holding him back, but now he's got no anchor. He's trying to do the prodigy thing, but he doesn't even know why he's trying to do it anymore. Like, he doesn't have that inner sense of gold that was from the mothering. That starts to fade back. He lived out of the past into the future, or into the present. Now he's just in the present. He's just ping-ponging around. And he might, for a season, just be completely devoted to, I'm just living for the attaboy from my dad. That might not even be there. And then what happens in that moment is what we call the destined one. And this is where God comes into the picture. You're old enough to start having an experience of God. Even if you're not religious, even if you've never been taught the gospel, you'll start feeling the call of destiny. You'll start asking these questions like, who am I? Why was I put on this earth? What am I created to do? These things start forming. And if you have a community around you that can kind of initiate you into these things, you got some spiritual people to lead you in prayer, maybe fasting, who knows what, it'll lead to an answer from God, where you'll have some picture of what you're supposed to be. And some kids just know, like, I'm supposed to be a doctor, I'm supposed to be a worship leader. You know, if you have a father who's working in the prophetic a little bit, that helps. But you grab a hold of who you're supposed to be. And that's like, you used to have this anchor that was in the nest. And it's like, I don't know who I am, I just know that I'm good because mama told me. And that detaches, and then it flies out over the present, way out into the future, and it hooks into, I know who I am because I know who I'm called to be. And I know that I'm worth the investment because that's what I'm going to do one day. And if instead of being a past tense thing about your goal, it's a future tense thing about your glory, about what God has called you to be. And that's a cool shift, right? But what happens then is then your teachers start, your father's your main teacher of the test. At that point, there's probably other men that are teaching you things in your community. But then there starts being this pull towards destiny. Like, as you learn stuff, like, there's things all men need to know. It doesn't matter what your destiny is. You need to be a good man. You need to be good at being a man before you can be a good man. You need to be a good man to be a man of God, right? There's a progression there. And there are things that your father is instinctually called. His heart tells him, I need to teach my son how to be a man. Now, where that goes wrong with a dad, just like it can go wrong with a mom, it can go wrong with the dad when he starts thinking, his instincts are saying, I need to make my son like me in being a righteous man. But he can just drop the end of that sentence in some point and say, my job is to make my son like me, period. In every way. And then any place where his son starts going, but my destiny's that way. I'm not supposed to be like you on that because your destiny's over there, mine's over here. We've got different destinies. I'm not supposed to be like you on that. And if the father doesn't understand that correctly, that's not understood, if he hasn't figured that out, it's a betrayal. And he's angry. He might attack that kid. He might abandon that kid. He might punish that kid because how dare you reject my teaching? How dare you, and it could be something like that. I feel called to, to go into ministry. Hey, I'm not going to make a lot of money doing it. But your dad looks at you and says, no, we make money in this family. We always support everybody. And it's a personal rejection to him. But to you, it's like, Dad, I can't reject my destiny. But that happens a lot. There's these very, very often repeated injuries that happen. Mother injuries, father injuries. That's why God uses this stuff a lot in our men's group to dig out trauma, to get out of strongholds. But my point is, so you're reaching out for your destiny. If you have a really well-developed dad, he'll say, yeah, I'm here to teach you how to be a good man. I'm not here to teach you how to be who you're called to be, because that goes beyond what I can teach. I know how to be me, and I'm a good man. That's as far as I can help you. And so he won't be jealous. He'll send you out to people who have callings more similar to yours and say, go learn from Uncle Robert, go learn from Uncle Danny, get some wisdom from them. They're a little closer to you in your calling. But then he'll always be reminding, look, son, there's nobody who can absolutely tell you or train you in how to be except for God. Because there's nobody who could replace you. There's nobody who could fill your shoes except you. You are not called to be a carbon copy of me or any other guy in this tribe. You are called to be your own man. We have a standard of righteousness, of masculine orthodoxy, the kind being a man as all men are called to be. But then there's the specifics of what God has destined you to do in this life. And nobody's really an expert on that except God. And so there becomes this point where it's not that you stop being the prodigy, but there's a point where the prodigy outgrows all of his teachers. Because they go, I taught you everything I could teach you about being a man. Now the questions you're asking about how to be that, nobody can teach you that but God. There's nobody who can initiate you into that but God. And so the destined one kind of uproots from dad, it uproots from these other men that he's sharing that role with, and it kind of does this. Here's the destiny, here's the destined one, here's the prodigy, and it goes like this. And it mixes together. And it becomes what we call the hero archetype. The hero archetype is this mixture of the cockiness of the prodigy and the destinedness of the destined one. And it fuses together. And this is like kind of what we talk about when you're a young man. I mean, honestly, you can be old and be stuck in this. You can be stuck in the earlier ones too. But your attitude is, I'm going to go get my destiny. There is no teacher who can teach me how to do it. I'm unteachable. I don't need anybody else. They've taught me everything they can teach. And there's credible, like you're think about your calling. Think about like, God called me to be a husband. He called me to be a father. He called me, whatever your secular vocation might be. He called me to be a man of God and called me to these things in the kingdom. And you look at that and you go, nah, I got it. I got it. It's all that bravado, all that cockiness. That's how you handle fear, right? You take full responsibility for it and you say, I'll go do that. No problem. And that's what like hero stories are about. We think of heroes, we think of like superheroes. Those don't have anything to do with old school archetypes. You got to go back to like Greek stories and older stories. And a hero in a Greek story is not what we think of as a hero. It's somebody who goes to that, they're a special child. They got the golden child. Like they're special. Everybody knows they're special. And then they're a prodigy. They're amazing at things and they're doing really good. And then they have destiny. There's somebody called them to a great destiny. And they have a moment where they have to pull away from all of their father figures and all this. I have to go out on my journey and fulfill my destiny. And then they go. But we would think they would go and achieve the goal in the story, right? We would think that's how a hero story goes. It's not. A A hero story, the hero always has a tragic flaw that he can't see. Almost always it's pride. Almost always it's what they call in the Greek stories hubris. And hubris is cockiness. It's bravado. It's a guy who thinks, I can do anything. And he goes out there to conquer his destiny. But his pride is this tragic flaw that destines him to failure. The expression they use is hubris breeds nemesis. You know what nemesis is? People think nemesis is, oh, that's your arch enemy. It's the hardest guy to defeat, and eventually you defeat him. Nemesis means the enemy you can't defeat. It's the guy who kills you. Now, if you think about it in like a warrior culture like the ancient Greeks, okay? If you walked out with bravado, you'd go, I can fight anybody. And you would get challenged to a fight. I could beat you, and you kill that guy. And then you go, I can fight anybody. So you fight a guy who's a little bit bigger and stronger. And then you fight a guy who's a little bit bigger and stronger. And then you fight a guy who's a bigger and stronger. What eventually is going to happen? Some guy's going to kill you because he's bigger and stronger than you, and you just can't win. Pride goes before the fall. Hubris breeds nemesis. And that's what happens in a hero's story. And we see this in all kinds of stories, like Tolkien with the Lord of the Rings. Frodo doesn't throw the ring into the fire at the end. Spoiler alert, he doesn't do it. He fails. But God comes through and the ring gets destroyed anyway. That's what happens. Evil self-destructs at the end of that story. And that's because the hero's journey, and this is wisdom for us. We like those stories because they tell us something about how we're supposed to develop, not because they're great entertainment necessarily, but because they touch us on those deep heart chords. We don't even know why it's touching us. The hero's journey is we're all on it. You're on it whether you know it or not. You're out there chasing your destiny, and you're doing it for the most part in cockiness. Maybe you have an issue with running back to the nest and hiding from it when it freaks you out. Maybe you deal with your fear by running to the boob. That's a horrible way of putting it, but honestly, you're running back to the bosom of mama, but it may be a bottle, it might be a rock, it might be a CB gummy, I don't know what it is, but you're running away, you're vegging out on TV, you're hiding from your life in this cocoon nest because you're afraid of the testing out there. Or you're running into it as hard and fast as you can in this cocky bravado place. That's the hero, that's what the hero does. I got this, and he runs out to do it. But what happens in a hero's story right after they leave home? Right after they go out, they get humbled. In stories, they've actually done spreadsheets on all these stories. There's usually a series, sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 3, it's usually a special number. But there's a series of like mini adventures that happen first before you get to the destiny thing. And they're failures. Like you come out and you're like, I am the one, I am destined, I am called. And you go out and you do something that's much easier than the big thing that God is calling you to do. And you fail, and you should be dead. And the only reason you're not dead is stupid luck. Like it's a stupid chance. It's not because of you. Somebody wrote in and saved you. God threw you a bone. Like you shouldn't have made it. Like in the story of the Lord of the Rings, this is in the books. Not all this is in the movies. But in the Lord of the Rings, Frodo is the ring bearer. He takes the ring. He leaves Hobbiton. He's going to go. And the first thing that happens to him, this isn't in the movies, but he meets this magical guy. His name's escaping me at the moment. What is it? I want to say Bilbo Baggins. That's not right. I forget his name. Anyways, he meets this magical, all-powerful kind of guy who lives in the woods. And then after that, he goes down into this haunted place that has all these burial mounds. And he says, you got to get through that place fast. There's burial rites down there. They'll come out. They'll enslave you. And so he goes through that place. And what happens is he and everybody gets captured, and they're about to be killed. It's going to end right then. And then I got his name. Tom Bombadil comes in and saves them.
Robert.
Yeah. I'm not surprised, Robert. Tom Bombadil came. I knew his name. For some reason, I blanked on it. And he saves them. It's not that Frodo did anything. Frodo got them killed. Like they were dying because Frodo made a bad decision. And then what happens? This guy saves them. And so Frodo has to sit there and say, I'm the destined one. I'm supposed to do this, but what got us killed? It was just kind of like stupid luck that we didn't die. And then they go to the next place. It's like the Prancing Pony or something like that. And the ring wraiths would have killed them, but Strider was there, put them in a different room, that kind of thing. He goes again, I would have died. I put the ring on in front of everybody. I did a bunch of stupid stuff that should have got us caught and killed. But luckily Strider was there to save us. And then they travel a little further, and Strider goes, I'm going to go look for some berries or something, right? And they go on top of Weathertop, and what do? They make a fire, and they cook some sausages, and all the ring wraiths show up. And then Frodo literally gets stabbed, and he's dying. And he would have been completely killed if it wasn't for Strider showing up and saving him again. And then he would have died if they hadn't carried his dying self on horseback all the way to Rivendell and got medicine and all that, right? And this injury that he gets at that moment is the injury of what? It's the injury of I can't. It's the injury of life peeling off that Band-Aid of bravado that says I can do anything. There's nothing that can stop me. That's the first lesson as you step out in that hero's place. You're like, I got this. I'm going to really go after my destiny now. God has called me, and you start running out to do it. And then it's not even what you're called to do. Like, you're called to do something crazy out here, and God gives you a business that's worth a few thousand. And over here is some giant thing He's called you to do. He gives you this tiny thing. And you look at it and you go, man, I was scared. I wimped out. I got too into. I bulldozed the thing in my own wisdom because I was afraid, and I rushed ahead, and it all should have blown up in my face. But then God threw me a bone and fixed it all. And you look at it and say, we should all be dead. I should have killed all of us. Like that. I don't know why that didn't happen. And that happens one time. You go, that won't happen again. And then it happens again. God has given you a great calling, but He's off. And then he gives you a family. And you see your family start to fall apart. And then God throws you a bone, saves something bad from happening, pulls the kid out of the fire. And you're sitting there realizing like, I thought I could do anything. And then in this moment, this is when you start looking back at how you grew up and your prodigy stuff. You start thinking, man, I think I thought I was a lot better at stuff than I really was. Like I grew up and I thought, man, I'm amazing at t-ball. I'm like the best t-ball player ever. And then you start looking back and you think, I don't know if I really was. I think I was doing okay. But I think I have this distorted opinion because I was being trained by others and there were safety nets. And that's what happens with God. Like, He took you through some things, but you didn't realize there were safety nets and little bumpers. Like, you're like, I bowled 300. You're like, there was inflatable things in the gutter, bro. You just didn't remember that that's what was happening. You didn't notice that God was putting the ball. You're like, I batted so good. It's like it was on a tee. You just didn't see it. Because God was gauging the tests to build you up and teach you how to face failure and teach you how to walk through these things. To learn how to learn. To learn how to step up and to never back down. Those are important lessons. The problem is when we learn those lessons, in our fallenness, we almost always bring bravado in. We almost always bring cockiness in. It's very hard to learn how to be competent and not be cocky and not have it be both. It's almost always like you get the gold, but you got the dross. Now you got to get the dross out of the gold. You got competent, you got powerful, but you also got cocky and prideful, and now we got to get that out. And that's what the hero's journey is all about, is where God puts the silver back into the fire to get the dross out. He says, you think you already are a man, and all the ingredients are there, but there's also this tragic flaw that will keep you from ever fulfilling your destiny. And so I'm going to take you through this journey to drive that out. And ultimately, at the center of that story is how you deal with fear. Because what happens when you start having these little things is eventually that Band-Aid gets ripped all the way off. If you're pushing for your destiny, it will get ripped off. And you will realize, I can't do it. I can't even do the small stuff you're asking me to do. I certainly can't do that. Like there was a point when little shepherd boy David looked at his destiny as king of Israel and realized, I can't actually do that. I can't get there. I can't make it happen. I can't do it after I got there. If God magically dropped me there, I couldn't handle it. I would screw it up. I'd ruin it. It would be worse than if I never tried. And that's different than the whiny I can't that your father dug out of you if you were lucky enough to have that kind of father. I can't do it, I can't. And you go, no, you barely tried. Nobody ties their shoes the first time they try. Stop it. Stop giving up. Get back in. Don't be a coward. Don't run from the fight. Get back into it. Be patient. That's the lesson your father teaches you. And that's good to get the whiny, I can't, and escape that cowardly I can't out of you. But at the end, as you get into the hero's journey and you start failing on your journey to God's destiny for your life, there's a different kind of I can't that rises up. It's not whiny, it's not emotional, it's just sober judgment. It's just looking at it and saying, real talk, I'm not that awesome, man. I really thought that I was, but guess what? Reality is humbling the crap out of me, and I realized, when I first got married, I thought I was going to own this thing, man. I thought, wake up, guys, you're about to see how this is done. And now I'm realizing, I don't know if I'll ever be the guy that I was called to be as a husband. I'm looking at it, and at this pace, it's never going to happen. I'm not even sure I can undo the damage I've done so far. I'm not even sure if I can get back to, get out of the red on this one, let alone do a good job. You have kids, you're like, watch out. Super dad's on the case. Back up, guys. The hero's here. I can do anything. And then you start getting humbled. And it's not that God lets it fall apart. That's the crazy part. You would never learn if God just let the thing kill you at the first time it could. He keeps pushing the devil back. He keeps saving you at the last minute. But you have to sit there and say, but I didn't do it. It wasn't because I was faithful. It wasn't because I was obedient. It wasn't because I made the right choice. I mean, in a big picture way, I'm still pursuing my destiny. That's faithful. That's obedient. But the truth was, in the middle of that situation, I freaked out and went into my flesh, and I didn't do the right thing. And I should have been smushed like a bug on a windshield, but God just saved me. Why? Because God's trying to peel that Band-Aid off. He's saying you've rejected the wrong part of fear. The I can't part is true. That's true. That's the little, every lie has a piece of truth in it that makes it palatable, that makes it work. A lie is a twisting of the truth. And you think the twisting is the I can't. That's the part that's true. You can't. You can't. The real lie of fear is that you're the one who's supposed to. That's the lie. You see, in these kind of stories, they have the series. It's like bum, 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 bum. A series of near disasters. Where it's like you completely screwed it up and you should have died. You got stabbed by the Nazgul on Weathertop, like, I'm dying. You almost stole the ring, and then somebody saved you. And at the end of that, you have this moment of decision. In The Lord of the Rings, it was in Rivendell when they put the ring on the stone. Remember the dwarf tried to cut it with the axe, and the axe blew up. And there's this moment where you could say, who's going to carry the ring? And you could back out. You know it's your destiny, but you could back out. Or you can keep going even though you're pretty sure you can't do it. All that just proved you can't do it. And you do that one, if you back out, if you go back home to the Shire, it's going to be in one of two ways. The first way is you go home as a coward. And when you go home as a coward, you just sit, right when they go, will you take the ring? You go, I can't. You just be complete on, I can't do it. And then you run away. And you're a coward. It's all over you. You go home and people will say, hey, what happened with the one ring? You go, I couldn't do it. I gave up. I'm not a good man. I don't have it in me. Didn't you marry that girl? Yeah, I left her. I couldn't handle it. But didn't you have kids? I ran off. I don't even pay my child support. I couldn't handle it. Didn't you go into ministry? I burnt out. I couldn't handle it. I ran away. I went and I tried to find a nest. A little mommy nest to climb back into and hide from the fact that I failed in my destiny. And when I talk to other people, I try to salt it with pity and try to get them to feel sorry for me. Because I know they're not going to love me for being a good man, but maybe they'll feel sorry for me that I'm so pathetic. That's the coward. Now what's the other way that happens? Is you get there and you start telling yourself stories. You probably started telling yourself stories at the beginning of the failure. Because you will not let go of the cockiness. You will not let go of the bravado. So you start twisting the story. Well, it's not really my fault. You know, it was the other stupid hobbits that decided to cook those sausages. And I would have had that Nazgul, but I tripped on a rock. And that's why he stabbed me. And you know, stupid Tom Bombadil, I was about to save us anyways. And then he just came in and ruined the whole thing. And you start telling yourself stories about how you can. It wasn't failure. You reject the failure lesson. You paste that Band-Aid on. But deep down inside, you know, if I take this ring of Mordor, I'm going to die. And so what you do is you say no, and you go home, but you say it something like this. Nah, you know, I thought that was my destiny, but it's not my destiny. Yeah, when I was young, I thought God called me to be an evangelist, but I'm not an evangelist. That's not my call. My calling is to be a Facebook missionary and just, you know, throw those little quotes on. Yeah, that's what I do. And that's what you do. You replace your destiny with something that's safe, that you know you can do, that doesn't scare you. And then you go around all puffed up, trying to act like you're a man, when deep down inside you know you aren't. The cockiness turns into grandstanding, and you become a bully. Because a bully is somebody who's a coward on the inside. They know they ran away, but they're desperate to hide it. And the only way they can hide it is by depending on the fact that probably other people are cowards too. And that if they act scary, the person will probably run away. It's what we call a grandstanding bully. Those are the two of the anti-types that come out of the hero when you don't finish the journey. What does Frodo do? What should we do as we go? I'm going to go. I don't know. I don't understand how I got the prodigy so wrong. I thought God was telling me I could do anything. I thought he was telling me that I'm created to do this, that I'm called to do this. I don't know how I misunderstood this. I thought it meant I can do anything. Clearly I can't. But there's one lesson I know that I learned, and that is don't be a coward and don't run away from your failure. And so if I'm going to fail, I guess I'm going to fail. If I'm going to die doing this, I'm going to die failing. That's it. It's not heroic failure where you throw the ring in and then you get killed. No, it's like I'm going to be killed on the way in, and they're going to get the ring, and everyone's going to be like, why did we send that stupid hobbit to do this job? He screwed it up. His family's suffering. Everybody. It's not a good failure, right? It's not martyrdom. It is failure. But you go, that's better than being a coward. And so you push yourself to face your fear. And so it's like Frodo saying, I'm going to keep going. What happens after that? Biggest failure of all. In the mines of Moria, right? He goes, Gandalf goes, where do you want us to go? And he goes, let's go into that mine. And they go in the mine, and Gandalf dies. Falls. Everything's screwed up. And he's sitting there saying, I'm not the guy. And right after that, what happens is they go into, I didn't even have all this Lord of the Rings stuff in my mind, but this is weird that this is all fitting in. But he goes into the forest right there, and what happens is he seeks an oracle. This is almost what always would happen in this situation. This is what will happen in your life, is you'll reach that point where it's like God's sitting you down and saying, will you complete your destiny? Will you go? And you're sitting there saying, I just got beat up 5 times. And the lesson of all those 5 times is I can't actually do this. I can't even do the small stuff. The fear is back because it's peeled off the bravado. It's telling me that I'm responsible to fulfill my destiny. It's telling me that I can't, and I agree with it. I can't look at this in any way and not see that that's true. It's true. It's true. I'm called to do that, and I can't do it. And so I've been running to the nest and getting drunk. I've been running on this treadmill like somehow I'm gonna suddenly start being able to do it. I'm lying to myself. You can do it. You can. I'm trying to talk myself into it. But I don't buy it because it's not true. And God says, but will you still go? Or are you going to run off and do your will? And you say, yes, God, I'll go. Pretty sure it's a suicide mission. I'm pretty sure I'm going to fail and disappoint everyone, but I'm not going to quit. I'm not a quitter. And you know what you get in reward for that? Biggest failure yet. Biggest one yet. And you survive. God still saves you, but you are shell-shocked. You're like, I'm definitely going to fail. That I can't is solid. And then what happens is you're like, I'm still on the path of destiny, but I'm gonna make a pit stop right here, and I'm gonna pray and say, God, what's going on? And you're gonna yield things up. Because there's a difference between saying I can't do something and really getting to the place of like, I can't do something. Like when you really give up hope. Like you can say I can't do it, but there's still hope. Maybe I can get it together. It's a long shot, but maybe I can get it together. There's a point when you go, I'm not going to pull this off. Like I'm getting worse. I'm not getting better. This isn't going to work. And you pull off for the pit stop. And that's what the Galadriel's mirror is for Frodo. Like he gets there and he looks in the mirror. It's a reflection of himself, but it's also his destiny, right? What goes wrong if he quits? And he's looking into it. God will bring you to that point, and the whole journey has been to get you to the point that you can look in the mirror and he can talk to you about this. You get to this place where your ego is deflated, the hubris is on the ground, you know Nemesis is going to kill you, you're there. And you say, I don't understand. I don't understand how this can be your destiny, but I can't do it. I don't understand that. I don't understand why you're calling me to do it if I can't do it. I don't understand that. I'm still obedient. I will do what you tell me to do, but it just doesn't make sense. And I'm consumed by fear. And I know it's a liar, but I can't see the lie in it. It seems like it's true on every point. That's what it looks like to me. And you go, God, I hold it up to you. And this is the moment where God says something like this. You thought that was your destiny, but it's mine. I started talking to you about your life and what I'm going to do with you and how I'm going to use you, and you are all possessive and selfish, and you said, oh, it's the story of me. It's the story where I'm the hero and I go and do great things, and God's like the secondary character. He's like the plucky comic relief back there. Thanks, Jesus. And I run out and I'm the hero. And God says, reality check. This isn't your destiny. It's mine. It's not something you're going to accomplish for me. It's something that I'm going to accomplish in you. You thought you were the hero. There's only one. I'm the hero. God's the hero. You're just the guy whose body he's going to use to do heroic stuff on this earth. It is your destiny, but it's not your responsibility. Because you can't do it. Only he can. At some point, David had to realize God is going to use me to be king over Israel. But that's a lot different than saying I'm responsible to be king over Israel. Responsibility says I can do it and I'm called to do it and I will do it. When the truth is, that's not the case. That's not the case. Like fear is saying that's the case. You might go, but I'm called to do that. I'm not denying the fact that you're called to do it. I'm not denying the fact that destiny is something that God is prophetically calling you into something in your life. The problem is when fear says it's on you to make it happen. That's the problem, right there. When you're sitting there and saying it's on me, what does Jesus say? John 15, vine and the branches. It says, you are my branch. I am the trunk of the tree. You're my branch. Without me, you can produce nothing. But if you abide in me and I abide in you, we will bear much fruit. I will bear my fruit through you. Think about what that means to be a grafting. You're a branch. You're cut off and you're plugged into another plant. You're plugged into Jesus. What does that mean? It's like you're going to bear the fruit, right? And you're like, bear fruit. Make the fruit come out. Where are you going to get your sap from? You're either going to reach into yourself for the strength and the courage and the ability. And you're either going to say, I can do anything. I can do anything I put my mind to. And you're going to try to bear that fruit. Or you can say, with me it's impossible. But with God all things are possible. Nothing is impossible for the man who trusts God to do it through him. Almost everything is impossible for the man who trusts himself to be God. That's what it says. It says that if that branch remains in itself, it will produce no fruit. It's not that it detaches. It's not that Jesus isn't right there. It's that it says, I got this. It wakes up in the morning and says, I got this. I'll be a good father today. I got this. I'm going to get into my devotions and I'm going to get spiritual and I'm going to bring the power and I'm going to bring the anointing and I'm going to go do this with the... Don't worry, God. I'm going to go get that destiny. I'm going to get it on the end of my spear. Don't worry about it. And you go there and you get yourself in trouble and it's proven that you can't do it. Like, you're about to die. And then Jesus comes up and punks the devil and saves your butt. And he looks at you like, are you getting the lesson here? You don't overcome the world. I've overcome the world. You only overcome the world when you get out of my way and you let me do it through you. God was holding this up to me. And this is a heavy lesson. But when fear comes knocking in your life, there's two things that people do that are wrong. The first thing that happens is fear says you're responsible and you can't do this. And you go, you're right, I can't do it, and I'm going to run from the fact that I'm called to. You say, I can't do it, and I am responsible, but I can't, and I'm not going to try, and I'm going to run as a coward, and I'm going to go find a nest to hide in from this. I'm going to try to cocoon myself. I'm going to find some motherly presence to cocoon me, so I can hide from it. Or that fear is going to come and say, you're responsible and you can't do it. And you go, I can do it. I am responsible, but I can do it. And you're going to go off cocky and in bravado. And you're going to get humbled again and again and again. And God's going to have to let the judgment hit a little bit closer to you each time. He's going to have to turn up the furnace hotter and hotter and say, are you going to let go of the dross? Are you going to let it float to the surface so I can scrape it off? Are you going to take the lesson that you can't? Are you going to allow yourself to be humbled? Or are you holding on to pride like it's what's keeping you afloat? Are you holding on to fear like it's what keeps you sharp when it's what's hollowing you out? What God wants us to do in that situation is to reject the argument of fear. When fear comes and it says, you're responsible and you can't, you go, well, it's true that I can't. That's true. But you know what? I'm not responsible for it. Not responsible for it. Could be your rent is late. Could be your kid is sick. Could be your marriage is in trouble. It could be that you're looking at your calling and you're like, I don't know how this is ever going to happen. I don't know how this ever comes together. I don't know how this church grows. I don't know how this book ever gets published. I don't know how I'm ever supposed to do the thing that God has called me to do. And you're looking at it, and where's that all coming from? It's because you're accepting this lie that it's on you alone, to get it done. You're trusting in yourself, and your trust is beginning to fail. Either your trust in yourself fails and you go hide in some boozy haze over here, or your trust doesn't fail, and you just believe in yourself, in the insanity of that, because you shouldn't believe in yourself. Look at what you've done to yourself. You are like the worst king of your life you've ever had. If you look at your track record of how you've screwed yourself in the past, there's nothing that's dumber than you trusting that you are going to fix any of your problems. You're going to make them worse. You always make them worse. That's why Jesus came to save you from yourself. That's the first and most necessary step of salvation. It's the hardest one for us to drink down and accept. Now, what God wants you to do when fear comes knocking is He wants you to say, Jesus, I got some fear here. He wants you to bring it right in front of Him. He says, Jesus, there's fear here. And it says, I'm responsible to do this. Figure out what it's saying. It's not going to be hard. It has to communicate that to you to work. So if you look at it, it'll be there. Trust God to give you some light. It'll be there. You'll say, I am afraid, God, and I'm afraid because I think I'm responsible for the rent. I think I'm responsible for the health of my marriage. I think I'm responsible for this and for that and the other thing. And I know I can't do it. Or I'm pretty sure I'm going to screw this up. And then what you say is this. You say, but I know that's not true. I know I'm only responsible to do one thing. And that is to yield and surrender to you. To trust you to save me. You know what the gospel is? The gospel is the reign of God has come upon you. You know what that means? That means in the garden, when it was, you look at the garden, it's very obvious. God takes care of everything. You look at heaven in the future, God takes care of everything. You're not stressed out. You have the peace of God because you're like, God's got it. He's got everything. He's got it. He's in control of everything. I'm going to pick some fruit today. I'm going to do this and that. But really, He's in control over everything. The reign of God, Him ruling over me. And salvation is Jesus saying, it's here right now. I can rule over you right now. I can take control over everything in your life. I just need your permission. I just need you to stop controlling it yourself. I need you to yield it up to me. I need you to give me your life. We think that's a one-time thing. Walk to the front, raise your hand, say the prayer. It's not. It's a position of heart. It's where you stand in your inner man every moment of every day. You're either under the reign of yourself or you're under the reign of God. And it comes down to this. Who do you yield to? Who are you yielded to? Fear's going to come and say, it's your responsibility, King of Danny's life. It's your responsibility, Philip, King over your life. It's your responsibility to do this. And you're failing, and you'll always fail. And you need to stop right there and go, you may be right that I can't. But you're wrong that it's my job because I'm not the king. That's Jesus' job to do all that. He wants that job. Even if I could do it, I shouldn't do it because it's His. I have no right to take it from Him. It's His job to take care of my family. It's His job to save me. It's His job to guide me in my devotions and make them worthwhile. It's His job to lead me into the fulfillment of my calling. It's His job to give me the faith and the righteousness and the holiness and the purity. That's all His job. I have one job. And it's not to do His, but to trust Him to do it. I remember when God first taught me this lesson, it wasn't about fear, it wasn't about anything internal. He was talking about sin and how to fight sin. And the thing is this. Sin uses that same argument. Sin comes up, and you go, lust is here. And what is the argument of the devil? You better fight it, but you know you'll lose. It's your responsibility to beat the lust, to get it out of your life. It's your responsibility to beat the gluttony and get it out of your life. It's your responsibility to beat the anger and get it out of your life. But you know you'll fail. You might be able to wrestle it for a while, but it'll win eventually. And God comes in and he says, you know what? It's true that you can't. But you know what's not true? That it's your job. I came to save you. I didn't come to sit down and watch you save yourself. I'd have to wait forever because that's never going to happen. What I need you to do is stop wrestling that sin and get the hell out of the way. Tag me in, bro. Tag me in. Trust me to handle it. And if you've ever been there where sin has beaten you up and then you say, wait a minute, Jesus, I yield the fight to you. And I trust that you have already beaten this thing. In a moment, the victory is there. Because it's not a victory Jesus has to re-win. He won it 2,000 years ago. He cried out on the cross, it is finished, it is accomplished. It's already there in the heavenly treasures. All the treasures of heaven in Christ in heavenly places. It's there. It's just a question of whether you're going to let the sap go through the branch and bear the fruit. That's all that faith is saying, I know you've already done it. I just need to stop doing it for you. Because I suck at it anyway. I remember in that example, I was reading a book, and I was studying out of Romans 6, 7, and 8. And the example I got, I was like this, reading it, biting the crap out of my fingernails like I have since I was a little kid. And this is something like I paint stuff on my nails that's like painful, that like, this is like hot sauce, or paint on stuff that tastes real gross. It's like the stuff you spray on wires to keep a dog from chewing on it, like sour apple. Paint it on your nails. And it's supposed to stop you. And I would literally bite my fingernails while watching TV with sour apple and not even realize I was doing it. I couldn't stop biting my fingernails. It's a weird thing. But God pointed to that and he said, let's use that as an example. He said, can you stop biting your fingernails? I was, well, looking at the track record, nope. And he goes, can you really stop? And I had to sit there and think, even if I could, it wouldn't really be success. It would be suppression. It would still be there. It would just like, how long can I keep the lid on this? And like we might think the same way when we look like, can you be a good husband? Well, the track record is no. And like, but can you really? And you go, well, I could suppress all my bad tendencies. I could force myself to do what I know I should do. But would I really be a good husband, or would I just be pretending to be a husband reasonably well for as long as I can hold it together? At some point you need to realize your flesh can't be what Jesus is. It just can't. And every attempt at it is actually insulting if you really knew what you were doing. You go, what the hell is wrong with me? And Jesus is standing there saying, I'll do it. I'll do it. Like when God showed me, it was like this idea. He's like, you're wrestling with trying to stop biting your fingernails. Which might seem like a weird thing. It's an example he gave me. And he's like, it's like you're trying to change a tire and you're not strong enough to get the lug nuts off. But I'm standing here. I'm like, hey, got the whole world in my hand. I think I can handle the lug nuts, kid. And I go, yeah, God, please help me. He goes, okay, well, will you get out of the way so I can do it? No, I'm going to do it. Just help me while I'm doing it. And he goes, no, then you'll think you did it. It's like when you're lifting weights and there's a spotter who has his hands on the bar. He's helping you, but you think it's you, but it's not you. It's like when you got a spotter, he's got to float, right? It's got to be not actually touching the bar. So it's absolutely that's you. Because you put it on there, that guy's going to help you, but you're always going to think it's you doing it. Yeah, he didn't really help me. That's all you, bro. That's all you. Why are you sweating it, man? Why you got a pump on your arm? Like, you're helping me. That's human nature. Jesus isn't going to spot you. He's going to say, get off the bench. Let me get in there. Yielding is the ultimate act of faith because it says, I'm not going to try to do it anymore. I'm going to step back. In that situation, it was real simple. I said, I'm not going to try to stop biting my fingernails anymore. I'm not going to try to do anything about it. Instead, I'm just going to hold it up to God. I'm not surrendering to it. I'm not going to bite my nails right now on purpose. But I'm not going to try not to. I'm just going to hold it up to God and say, it's your job now. And I'm going to trust that in the moment that I let go, you're like, thank God I got it. But you're instantly in there. You're instantly doing it. Not because there's some tingle in my fingers, not because there's some emotion in my heart. No, it's real faith. It's not walking by sight. It's walking by faith. And in that moment, I didn't feel any tingles or anything. I didn't even think it was like a very mechanical exchange. I was like, okay, I'm not going to try to stop biting my fingernails anymore. I'm giving it to you, and of course, I know you got it. And I walked out completely confident that I was not going to bite my fingernails anymore. And I didn't. It was that simple. It wasn't anything I struggled over, and I could look at it and say, this is a miracle that I don't do this anymore. Later on, it was other things, sexual sin, all sorts of things like that, where it was just like God pointed it to me. Impatience. I used to be an incredibly impatient person, and I was just like, well, you think you're ever going to be able to be patient? No. Even if I could fool other people for a minute, it's not going to be real patience, because flesh isn't patient. Jesus is patient. Will you get out of the way and let me be your patience for you? Okay, I'll give you the job. Do you believe I'm really doing it? Yes, I believe you're doing it right now, whether I can feel it or not. And guess what? The fruit always catches up and blows me away. That's how salvation functions. It's Jesus' incarnational life through his Holy Spirit in you. It's Jesus taking over and doing things that you would never be able to do in yourself. When I was in Africa, I was terrified. Probably should have took this lesson more to heart, but I really didn't want to drive because it was in Africa and it's crazy. They don't have rules. I didn't speak the language. You get pulled over by guys with machine guns. They look like the guys from Tears of the Sun that just killed everybody, and they pull you over and they start talking to you in French, and you're like, I don't speak French. I don't know what to say to you. I don't know. Here's my ID. They're trying to get a bribe out of you, but you don't have the money to give them a bribe because you're a poor missionary, and the policies never give them a bribe, or every missionary is going to have to pay a bribe, and so you don't do it. But then it's like they're going to keep you here forever until they get it. And that's just that angle of it. Then it's like you're driving in the city, and it literally looks like a destruction derby, like with cars just like nosing into each other. It's really freaky. And I was like, man, I don't want to do this. But I had to. And so it was like I had to drive all the way across the country to the coast. And God was like, why don't you let me do it? And so it was like I would get behind the wheel of the car every day that I had to drive. I'd get behind the wheel of the car and say, I can't do this. I mean, I can do this. Push the pedals, shift the gears. I can do that. But I can't really do the whole thing. I can't do this with joy in my heart. I can't do this the way that Jesus would do this. I can do it white-knuckled and probably screw it up at some point, but I can't do it the way Jesus would. And I'm not going to try. Right now, I'm going to believe God for a miracle. I'm going to believe God that when I say I'm letting this go, that he's taking hold. And that when I start this car and I put it into gear and I start driving down this road, that God's going to be completely in control over all this. And it was crazy. I went from being like having a hard time going to the local market that was like 5 minutes of jungle roads, which was also scary because trucks just flew through there and there were accidents that happen all the time. But I was scared of that. And then it was like drive across the whole country and try to navigate. And I did the whole trip. I had a great time. Like totally carefree, totally at peace, driving this thing. And it was like literally like I had this confidence in God where I was like, I would do crazy things. Like, oh, we have this giant ditch. And they were like, the villagers were like, just a second. And they would grab like a railroad tie and they'd throw it across the ditch. And then they like measure how far your tires are apart. And they would go over here and they put 2 railroad ties across this hole that would eat your car. And then you have to drive. So, in a big Land Cruiser, so all your tires hit that, don't fall off into it. And I'd be like, I almost said, I got this. But I'd be like, Jesus has got this, and just bam, and I would do it. And it worked. It's crazy, right? But that's what God's saying. It's like a lot of us, we're in this place where we're working out of some false understanding of how salvation works and a false understanding of how to be a man or a woman. It really doesn't matter. Everybody's got to deal with fear. And what we do is we let the devil put the responsibility on us. If you really think about all the things that the devil's coming and putting on you for fear, you put all that responsibility together, you know what job it would describe? Being God. That would be the job it would describe. If you looked at everything, I need to be able to control the health and safety of these people and this people. I need to know what's going to happen in the future too. And then I need to be able to handle things in the past that were already screwed up before I got here and fix those somehow. And if you really put all the things that fear says you're responsible for together in a single job description, you'd be like, the only person who can do that is God. That is a description of God's job. And Satan is here telling me, you need to be God and you can't. How do you respond to that? You say, you're right, I can't do that, but it's not my job to be God. It's my job to be a vessel for God. It's my job to be the branch that yields to God and says, I trust you to do it through me. That's my job. What does Jesus say? Come to me, all you who are heavy laden and are weary, and I will give you rest for your souls. He says, come to me. I am humble and of lowly heart. I'm not going to lord over you. I'm not going to slap you around and say, what's wrong with you? You haven't figured this out yet. I'm going to take you like a father should, through one test at a time and gradually teach you how to do this. And what am I going to do? I'm going to put my yoke on you. I'm going to take that big heavy yoke of being God of your life, of ruling over your life and making it all work. And I'm going to throw that in the fire. So that's not your job. Actually, that's my job. I'm going to wear that one. And this is the yoke I'm going to put on you. And it's the yoke of a servant. It's not your job to know the future. It's not your job to have a 5-year plan to figure everything out. It's not your job to figure out how you're going to get to the mountain and throw the ring in the fire, accomplish your mission, do all these things. It's not your job to do any of that. That's my destiny that I'm going to bring out in your life. Your job is to wake up every morning and surrender, to let it go, to get off the throne, to take off the crown and scepter, to hand it to me and say, here's my life, God. I trust you. I trust your Spirit's going to be on me. I trust you that you're going to be whispering through my conscience. I trust you that you're going to bring up what I need to remember, when I need to remember it, and that I trust you to give me the desire to cry out to you in prayer when I need it. I trust you to give me the peace of mind that when the phobos fear slaps me in the face and I have that sober moment, that I use it to turn to you and to lift up whatever is in front of me, that scary thing that's in front of me, to lift it up in prayer and say, God, it's yours. This is your life. This is your problem. I lift it to you and I praise you and I thank you. You're already handling it. In the moment I yield it into your hands, it's yours and you're in control. And God, even if I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I know it's not because you're not in control. Because that's what Satan does, right? You yield it to God and then you get a bump in the road. And then you go, see, I told you, if you don't do it, God's not going to. You're just going to crash the bus. And your job in that situation is to say, I'm not God. I don't know what his plan is supposed to look like. But I can tell you this. This is it. Even if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. What are those? The rod is what God uses to defend you from the things that are going to attack the sheep. And the staff is the thing with the hook on it to pull you out when you fall in a hole because you're retarded and you can't help yourself. And you're going to screw up along the way. But the central heart of it all, that fearless heart that drinks in the peace of God is this. God's in control. And there's nothing missing. There is nothing broken in my life. if I've yielded it into his hands. The second I hand something over into his hands, it's perfectly in his control. There's nothing better I could ever do with any problem or any situation than to yield it into his hands and say, God, you got this. It's your call. Give me a ring if you need me to shift a gear, but I know you're driving this car. And God will take over. Now, is there going to be testing? Absolutely. But God is going to do little tests. Is the devil going to be knocking on his door saying, let me test his faith. I don't think he really trusts you. Yes, and you're going to screw up. But don't throw that on God. Don't believe the lie. Stop today. Stop today believing the lie that you're responsible to bring about your destiny. Because that's only a job that God can do. Stop believing the lie that you're responsible to be a holy and righteous person that makes the right decisions. That is not something a carnal person like you or I could do. We only do it by the power of God. And that only happens when we yield to him in faith, when we just trust him to work. We're not trying to get the willpower. We're not trying to suck some purity up from the empty, dry corners of our branch, but we're reaching out to Jesus and saying, I yield that your life might flow through me and bear fruit. I trust you to do it. I'm not going to try to produce any fruit in myself. I trust you to work in me. God will bless you. You'll be shocked at the miracles Christ will work in your life if you get out of the way and you stop trying to produce them yourself. That's what real trust looks like. You sitting there saying, I trust you, God, but you're still trying to change the tire. That's not faith. That's doubt disguised as faith. That's fear, saying I can't stop trusting myself because then I would just have to trust God to do it. And I don't trust him. Dig that out. Confess it. Deal with that sin of unbelief. Deal with what? That faithlessness. There's a reason why it's the cowardly and the faithless in that first part of that verse. Deal with that stuff. Bring it before God. Confess it out. He'll cleanse you. He's faithful to cleanse and restore you from all unrighteousness. And make room in your heart for what God wants to pour out in you. I want to encourage all of us to take a moment, even right now. You can close your eyes in prayer if you want to. But I encourage you to take a moment to lift up the fear that is foremost in your heart, the one that God's been pointing out to you in this sermon, and to lift it up.
2%.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right. To lift it up and say, God, here's my fear. Don't worry about that thing dying. Doesn't matter. To lift it up and say, God, here's my fear. It tells me that I'm responsible to do, fill it in, blank, fill it in. It tells me I'm responsible for this and that I can't do it. But I know that's not true. I know even by your whisper in my heart right now, in this sermon, in this time, I know that my responsibility is to yield every other responsibility into your hands, to trust you to do it around me and in me and through me. And so God, I let go. I don't let go because I've given up on the destiny. I'm still right with you. Your will be done. Your destiny be fulfilled. I'm right there. I'm not turning back. I'm not hiding. I'm not running away. But I'm not going to do it in my strength either. I'm going to lift it up to you and I'm going to let it go. I'm going to say it's your baby, God. And if you need me to carry out some physical act of obedience, you need me to say a prayer, you need me to turn left or right, I'm here. That kind of stuff I can do. Just tell me where to position myself. But when it comes to the success of the mission, when it comes to the secret ingredients, when it comes to willing and working according to your good will, I yield all that to you because I can't make it happen. I can't do it. I couldn't do it in a million years. Guess what? I'm going to stop trying right now. I'm going to stop. And I'm going to trust not that you will do it, but that you're already doing it. But the very moment I let go, in faith, you're taking hold. Whether I feel it or not, that's not important. Whether there's instant fruit, that doesn't happen. It takes a minute. But I want to trust you. And that reward is actually in being able to fall back into your arms. The reward is actually that your life is coursing through me right now. Whether I feel it or not isn't important, but the fact that it's there, that's the win. That's more important than even the fruit it will bear, is that you are in me. Christ in me, the hope of glory. The miracle is here when I let go in real faith. Now, people try to make letting go, yielding into work. They try to make faith into work. It's just letting go, man. It's just you stop doing it and stop doubting it. It's the most peaceful thing ever, because that's when the peace of God starts stealing in upon your heart. Starts wrapping around. The peace of God comes and guards your heart and mind. What? When you make the petition, when you say, God is yours, and then you begin to what? Add thanksgiving. Say, God, I know you got it. I know you already got it right now. That's your promise, God, that if I come in faith, if I yield anything to you in faith, that you take it. You're the Lord of the universe. I stole this from you, God. I stole this life from you. I stole these choices from you. And the moment I yield them back and say, truly, God, it is yours, I give it back to you. You take it. Without a doubt, you take it. Without a doubt, it is in a better situation than it's ever been, and on the path of salvation right now for having done it. So we yield this up to you even right now, God, in Jesus' name. And God, we trust in your peace to come upon us. We trust for the fear to fall away. And we trust not just for a peace of heart, but a peace over our life, for the shalom peace of you actually being in control over that situation, of it working out according to your will, no matter what that looks like. And that would flow through us into the deepest of places. God, we thank you that you are the Lord over our whole life, if we will but let it go to you and trust you for it. Lord, I thank you for this message, and I pray you would bless everyone who heard it, that we'd have room for it, and that it would truly bless us. In Jesus' name, amen. That's it.